Chapter 1184. There was a large undulating group of magnificent buildings in the forest hidden by the mountains. Looking down at these towns from a high altitude, it seemed that these towns were built in the forest. No, it seemed that they were built in the forest. From a distance, they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with them. They only felt that these towns were divided into parts by the forest and the river. It was not until they got closer that they could clearly see that these were actually cities built by the forest and the river. The most conspicuous buildings were unusually prominent in the forest. Those were the independent towns that Ziyin and the others saw. If there was a sole building in this large city on the front side of Half Moon Ring Mountain, it must be the building in the middle of the mountain. It was a square spire surrounded by a circle of minarets. 10% below the top of the spire was a wide ring of buildings 10 meters away from the spire. The ring of buildings was inlaid with energy crystals. They were the energy crystals that Ziyin and the others saw on the giant turtle. The energy here was all gathered in the huge crystal at the top of the spire. The energy would be released through the crystal, forming two huge energy shields that shrouded the entire Half Moon Ring Mountain and the entire floating island. That's the defensive crystal tower. The shield that you see covering the entire floating island is spread out from it. It was built here for the so-called sense of security. In fact, it has never been used. But I'd rather not use it one day. The day this energy shield comes into effect is probably the day the Defender realm attacks the center of the battlefield. Old Wu patted a box in his hands and sighed. The scale of the sacred city is even more magnificent, and its defense is even stronger. The floating island you see is actually one of the defense nodes. Ziyin and the others were sitting on a giant bird, while Old Wu and his cronies were on another one. This thing was called an eagle in this world. It looked like a hybrid between a giant dragon and a crow. But this thing did not have the blood of a dragon, and there were no dragons in this world. When Yishi saw this eagle, she said that Old Wu and the others did not know what a dragon was. This was a description that only the few of them could use. The eagle that looked like a giant dragon and a crow had a wingspan of more than 10 meters. It had a giant beak like a crow, feathers like a crow, and 4 claws like a dragon. They were talking about the 4 claws of a giant lizard. Along its back, there was a row of unidentified objects that looked like dragon spikes. Anyway, it felt weird. They did not like the look of it. Old Wu and the others were completely used to the existence of this thing, so they did not feel anything special. This was a kind of life form in this world. It replaced the airship as a short-distance flight tool. Its speed was only slightly slower than the airship, but it could only fly as far as 3 floating islands. There was no land here for them to rest. Before they ran out of energy, they could either find a floating island to rest on or crash. After disembarking from the airship and sitting on this strange eagle, Ziyin and the others finally felt a sense of familiarity. In the realm of the gods, airships were rarely used. Most of the time, they used teleportation portals, flew by themselves, sat on Yun Nua's sword, or were teleported back and forth by him, or. Also, airships in the realm of the gods were really ships. They were the kind of ships that could sail on the sea and fly in the sky, unlike the strange ones here. When Ziyin and the others approached the town, they could not help but feel a little stunned. They had imagined that in this time of endless war, they might see a large number of panicked warriors rushing about. At the very least, they could feel the tension in the air. But when they actually stepped into the town, they could only feel that everything was normal. That's right, these 4 words were all there was to the atmosphere here. Ordinary people lived and worked in peace and contentment, doing what they were supposed to do in broad daylight. The only thing that was not harmonious was the fact that everyone was wearing black robes. The humans in this world are very similar to the humans in the realm of the gods. There is no accurate individual judgment. We can only guess what the differences are within. The voice of the barrier's consciousness softly rang in their ears. Are there differences between humans as well? Ho Ming asked softly. Yes. The void is endless and there are countless worlds. Even if the same species were born in different worlds, they would naturally behave differently due to the influence of the laws. But most of the differences are within, and they are very similar. The humans in this world are able to adapt to harsh environments faster and can use the energy of harsh environments for their own use. The subjects of observation here are ordinary humans. They are life forms that do not have high power. Ordinary people in the realm of the gods cannot do this. Is it caused by the special environment of this planet? Yi Shi recalled what he said. There was a layer of high-energy reaction on the ground that made it uninhabitable. It is caused by the environment. It is also caused by the influence of the laws. There are many reasons, but only these two are known to have the greatest influence. The barrier's consciousness nodded. The city in the forest was quite large and peaceful. Xian and the others could not help but take a few more glances at it. The giant eagle that they rode descended from the sky. Because of that, they could see many things that could not be seen from above. Many buildings were hidden in the forest. They could only see them clearly as they descended. While they were observing the city below, many people on the ground also looked up. Some people solemnly saluted the giant eagle that flew across the sky. They seemed to have recognized Old Wu and the others. Moreover, they had seen the stable airship more than 10 minutes ago, so they were not surprised that Old Wu and the others flew across the sky. In fact, some people were even looking forward to seeing them pass by. It was rare for ordinary people to see someone like Old Wu. Even if they flew across the sky, it would be good to catch a glimpse. The people of this world, it was probably because of the people from the battle zone. The people they saw were all wearing black robes. When they got closer, they realized that the style of the black robes was not exactly the same. Some had hoods, some had strange patterns on them, and some had something else. The only thing that was completely black was that the color was completely the same. Moreover, the clothes also had a faint energy glow. When the sunlight fell on the black clothes, it was like a stream of water that was blocked by the clothes and then fell to the ground along the trajectory. With the people wearing black robes, the surrounding ground was a little brighter. What are those? Blocking the sunlight? Dying in the light? Yi Shi could not help but ask. Clothes made of a special material. It is a specialty of this world. The humans of this world do not seem to have a high resistance to sunlight, starlight, and other light. Those who are at a high level will not show any reaction, but those who are at a lower level will not be able to resist sunlight for too long. According to the calculations, after 5 minutes of exposure to sunlight, their bodies will show signs of tearing. It seems to be a special reaction that exists in the body. When triggered by sunlight, it will self-disintegrate, the barrier's consciousness said. Then they will really die in the light. Is that even possible? Yi Shi was stunned. She had just said it casually. She did not expect that they would really die in the light. It seemed that there were differences between the human race that they did not know about. The population of this city was not small. There were many residents on the streets, so many that it was a little strange, because there were only residents. Those who were bustling, noisy, and shouting were all ordinary residents. In other words, they were all ordinary people. There was not a single life with a high energy reaction. Yi Shi could not help but say this to Old Wu. He smiled helplessly. Because most of the people have gone to the front line to fight. The rest of the people in this city are mostly the old, the weak, the women, and the children. You can't feel the presence of any powerful people. If you want to say, the only powerful person left in this city is me. Because I just came back. There is no need to protect the rear. It seems that there is no need to protect the rear. Yi Shi slapped herself on the forehead halfway through her sentence. Old Wu shrugged. The defense region could not break in. Yes, it could not break in for the time being. As for the war region itself, no matter how big the grudges between the holy kings were, they could not fight each other after entering this gate. That was right, they could not fight each other for the time being. Therefore, there was no need to defend the rear. If the defense region had such a strong force to sneak in, they could just kill the leader directly. Xian and the others came to a place close to the half-moon ring mountain and landed. They came out of the giant eagle's energy shield and shivered. They felt a slight chill from the cold wind that came from the sky. Only then did they remember that Old Wu's territory was 7,000 meters above the ground and was closer to the north. The cold wind had been whistling in this place, but they had been holed up in the energy shield the whole time, so they did not feel anything at all. Now that they came out of the giant eagle's wind shield, they breathed in the cold air of a foreign world for the first time. It seemed that it was not as cold as the wind in the north and south ice realms, nor was it as deep and profound as the wind. If it was this temperature, the mountain rocks should have been frozen into ice. But what appeared in front of them was a scene of spring all year round. The mountains and forests were green, and there was no cold winter at all. Speaking of which, this was another world, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Everything was normal. It is now spring and summer in this world. You feel cold because the average temperature of this world is lower than that of the realm of the god. It is about the temperature of the border between the ice realms and the origin realm. The people here are used to it, so you won't feel any discomfort with your own strength, the barrier's consciousness said. Ming rolled his eyes. So this was indeed another world. This temperature was still considered spring and summer. If it was winter, wouldn't it be so cold that one's face would be frozen? The Xing deity came to my palace. Let me think. Old Wu pinched his scalp and thought for a while. He should be waiting for me at the obelisk. But Holy King, did the Xing deity go to your palace? The white-haired, sage-like elder asked in confusion. Ah, I know, but the Xing deity does not sit in his palace for long. Instead of waiting, he prefers to play hide and seek with others. Every time he comes to my place, I have to look for him for half a day, and most of the time, I will find him at the obelisk. Old Wu smiled helplessly. Yi Shi was startled. Are you familiar with the Xing deity? Old Wu nodded. His trusted aide moved closer to Xian and the others and whispered, Holy King Wu has lived for more than 1,000 years. Besides the old Xing deity, he is the oldest person in the battlefield. To Holy King Wu, the current Xing deity is like a child. I heard that Holy King Wu taught the current Xing deity, but that was a long, long time ago. Xian and the others let out a long sigh. They felt that this was normal. They had interacted with much older people. It was better not to poke at his back. Ahem. Old Wu coughed softly and glanced sideways at his confidant, who suddenly stood up straight and looked straight ahead. He had heard every single word. Although he did not mind the fact that he was young, he still felt uncomfortable when it was brought up again and again. Don't you need to rest for a while after the long journey? Old Wu raised his hand and pointed at the tallest tower. There's still a long way to go from here, and there won't be any transportation after that. We will have to walk. It's fine, it's fine. Uncle, you don't have to worry about us. We're not as delicate as you look. We've already gotten used to climbing mountains. Yi Shi grinned. Xian and Ming nodded in agreement. They had followed Yun Nuoshing all those years and had traveled far and wide, eating and sleeping in the open. To put it bluntly, they had slept in the forbidden area before, so some fatigue was not unbearable. Besides, they did not feel tired at all. In that case, time is of the essence. Let's go now. Old Wu nodded. The Xing deity was still waiting for him in the tower, and he could not let her wait for too long. The place where the giant eagles landed was a huge plaza. They weren't the only ones who had landed here. This was the landing area for the giant eagles. There were a few small sheds at the edge of the plaza where 2 or 3 smaller giant eagles were huddled up. It looked like they were rented out to others. After all, not everyone had their own giant eagles. There were also some shops and buildings that looked like pavilions on the side of the landing platform. They didn't look like the boxy buildings that Ming Ming was familiar with, nor were they the pavilions of the celestial realm. The architectural style was very strange, and there was an indescribable sense of beauty to them, even though they were just ordinary buildings. Places with transportation are always more prosperous than other places, Xian said softly. It seems to be the case everywhere. Because it's convenient. Ming nodded in understanding. Just like in the celestial realm, those cities with portals were all big cities. She did not know if it was because of the portals that it became a big city, or because it was a big city that had portals, but she felt that both were similar. The group hurriedly flew toward the obelisk in the city. The leader of the battle arena was waiting for them at the obelisk. To be specific, he was waiting for Old Wu and the others. After entering the city, he made some simple arrangements for his trusted subordinates and said something else. Only then did he carry the black wooden box and lead Xian and the others to the obelisk. The city was still very lively. Perhaps it was because there were no high-level experts around, but the atmosphere in the city could be said to be even more relaxed. After flying through 2 or 3 streets, they could not help but feel relaxed. It was really too serene and peaceful. Just by looking at this city, who would have thought that this world was in the midst of an abyss of war? Through the few words they heard from below, Xian and the others unexpectedly obtained some information. First of all, some places in front of the door of every house, and some places where the shop signs were hung, would be engraved with the mark of the battle arena. They had originally thought that this was some kind of symbol of the battle arena's army. Even in the celestial realm, they had not seen every house with the mark of their protector hanging on it. Even in the celestial realm, there was no such thing in the floating island cities of the 9 temples. The former's mark seemed to be more complicated than they had imagined. It was not as simple as the battle arena's army. Perhaps there was something else. Those marks. Look at the marks all over the city. Do you think of anything? Ming carefully prodded the stronghold's consciousness and said. The stronghold's consciousness looked down from above Little Purple Soul's head. This city was really filled with the marks of the battle arena. It was so densely packed, from the simplest markings on the ground, on the houses, and even on the clothes. It was more like faith. The stronghold's consciousness said concisely. The answer it gave them a slight shock. Was this what it meant when it said that there were 3,000 believers everywhere? The whole city was filled with this mark. What did they believe in? Was it a fictional existence? Or was it a real life? Or was it something else? Speaking of which, when they heard the people in the city talking, they would occasionally mention a name. The god of the battle arena. Oh, so this battle arena was a country with faith. Did that mean that there was also something like a god in the guardian realm? Damn it, did they get themselves involved in some serious matter? Although there was no such thing as faith in the realm of the gods, as far as they knew, they heard it from Yun Nuoxing, the waters of faith were a little deep, especially in the 8 elemental realms. If there was such a thing as faith in the 8 elemental realms, then it would not be as simple as 1 or 2 realms. While they were letting their imaginations run wild, the noise around them suddenly quieted down. It was very quiet, almost as if there was no sound at all. The entire area was shrouded in a peaceful atmosphere, as if all sound was being absorbed by something. There were only faint whispers left, and they did not know where the whispers came from. They seemed to be coming from the sky or from their hearts. The faint whispers lingered in their ears, causing Xian and the others to subconsciously look around, but they did not see anything different. Ziyen covered her chest with her hand and looked around in confusion. She had a feeling, an indescribable feeling. The soft whispers that reverberated in her ears were like the faint whispers that came from Ming Ming's body, but it wasn't just that. She really felt that there was something or someone whispering in her ears. That voice was very strange. It was a very strange voice. If this voice really belonged to a human, it would be very easy to remember. It's the echo of some sort of entangled consciousness. There's a high-level entity here, the barrier's consciousness said faintly. It is estimated to be at least a divine spirit-level life form. The rules entwined around its body and the echoes of its will are of a higher level. It can't completely restrain that will, and the part that leaked out has formed a domain of its own. Keeps making meaningless sounds like echoes. Old Wu did not hear its voice, but he heard a soft whisper. He could not help but feel excited. The Xing deity is here. This is his domain of calming souls. Looks like I'm right. She glanced at him and whispered to Xian and the others, there's really a high-level entity here, and it's a divine spirit. Ming suddenly stared at the golden Mei Mao and pulled Xian's sleeve in horror. She pointed to the sky and said, Sister Xian, look there. She was pointing at the top of the obelisk, which was the crystal that protected the entire floating island. The crystal was a strange combination of light purple and light red, and it had a very high energy reaction. But the crystal itself was not the main point. In the center of the crystal, there was a faint shadow that was illuminated by the light purple and light red. Old Wu noticed the change in their expressions and followed their gaze. He could not help but smile. It's amazing, isn't it? I bet there was no such thing in ancient times. The statue of the god of war was replaced with an energy shadow 1,000 years ago, erected at the highest point of every city. That's right, it's there. It symbolizes the scene of the supreme god overlooking all living things from the clouds. Yishi's forehead was covered in cold sweat. She reached out and touched the barrier's consciousness. She whispered, Is it real? In terms of appearance and characteristics, it's not a complete match. But if it's mixed, the barrier's consciousness closed its eyes. There's no doubt that it's the real one. Chapter 1185. This was a world with faith. Xian and the others had never come into contact with this so-called faith, so they did not know how it existed or how it was rooted in everyone's hearts. However, from the situation of the city in front of them, they could deduce that the object of faith must have an extremely high status in the hearts of its believers. It must be a godlike figure, distant and inviolable, the most sacred existence. However, it was not just the kind that floated high in the clouds that could not be touched. This could be seen from the fact that the god of war was constantly mentioned by everyone and not owned by anyone alone. Perhaps for this war-torn world, faith was a spiritual pillar? It could support two groups of people to fight to the point where their skulls were about to be flipped open, and they would never back down. They also did not know what kind of immortality they believed in. They just happened to stumble into this world, and just happened to discover the existence of faith in this world 2 or 3 minutes ago. They just happened to bump into the soul building of this city, and just so happened to see the figure inside the crystal at the top of the building. The crystal was more than 10 meters tall and stood at the top of the obelisk. It shone with a faint purple and red light, but the light could not hide the figure inside. An illusory figure stood quietly inside the crystal. His figure constantly changed as the light surged. He was wearing a long black robe, and a loose black cloak that dragged across the ground was draped over his back. The cloak fluttered in the wind, and the details of the cloak could be seen clearly. It did not look like an energy projection that had been solidified for many years. It looked more like he was standing there with a scepter in his hand, overlooking this world, as if he was protecting all living beings. Under his gaze, this world should be peaceful and peaceful. Perhaps no one would have thought that a war like this would break out today. Perhaps this world should have been peaceful and stable to begin with. Xian and the others looked up, following the luxurious robe, and finally focused on the face of the energy figure. They saw an extremely beautiful face, a beautiful face filled with a delicate aura. It was so beautiful that it was impossible to associate it with a man. They were very familiar with this face. It was different from the appearance of Quarter Moon in the consciousness of the stronghold. This was Yun Nuoxing's face, which was exactly the same as his own. However, his eyes looked a little strange. They looked majestic, but there was also a trace of indescribable laziness in them. It was as if the owner of the energy figure had always been lazy, and the person who left the energy imprint on him seemed to want to change something about him to reflect the majesty of their god. They tried their best to make him look majestic, but they could not bear to destroy that perfect face, so they could only change his eyes to make him look like a person with a paralyzed mind. If he were to say this out loud, he would definitely be drowned by the spit of saliva from the 3,000 followers of the battle arena. However, they were already too familiar with him. Even his body, that is to say, even his sacred glyphs could be drawn with their eyes closed. That was why they felt that his gaze was an awkward one that had been altered. Perhaps in the eyes of the people of the battle arena, it was still very awe-inspiring. If they were given a chance to alter it, they would be able to replicate the expression of that person who was usually smiling and could cause chaos in the world when he went crazy, as if a god had personally descended. Xian felt a little dizzy. In fact, she did not need to use the barrier's consciousness to confirm anything. She would not mistake Yun Nuoxing's face. Whether it was Quarter Moon's face or Yun Nuoxing's face, there was no mistaking it. The energy silhouette in front of her was obviously related to Yun Nuoxing, but it was not the person she had seen before. If she were to reverse the awkward expression of the sculpture, she would probably see a guy with a lazy expression on his face, which was very different from the one they were most familiar with. He rarely had such a majestic expression. Usually, he would either appear carefree and cheerful, or when he went crazy, his ferocious and dark expression would be enough to stop children from crying at night. The rest of the time, he would have a profound and unfathomable expression that was as deep as the abyss. The energy shadow in front of him that looked like him, yet didn't look like him at the same time. Damn it, it definitely had an inseparable relationship with him. Was there a second person in this world who had the same face as him? However, what he couldn't figure out was, how did this strange world involve that guy? Old Wu and the others stood there and did something to the energy silhouette. They seemed to be praying, bowing, or doing something else. Xian and the others took this opportunity to stare blankly at the strange energy silhouette of the god of war in the crystal. The more they looked at it, the more dizzy they felt. It was as if thousands of thoughts were surging into their minds, but they could not grasp anything when they stretched out their hands. Big Brother is really everywhere. Little Purple Soul also felt dizzy when she saw the sculpture. She scratched her long hair and showed a strange expression. When Ming heard that, his expression became even more strange. His footprints were all over the void. He thought it was a metaphor, but it turned out to be a statement. Even a planet that flew in from the outside world could have his shadow on it. She had a nagging feeling that something was amiss, as if there was something that didn't match. The strange division of this world, the strange stagnation of the void, and the face of the god of battle domain. That's right, it was her brother's face. She was very familiar with it and had engraved it in her heart countless times. There was no way she would mistake it. The two faces met and perfectly overlapped. It was this that made her feel out of place. When did this world exist? The consciousness of the barrier heard Ming's whisper, and could not help but be stunned. Silver light flashed in its eyes. It is impossible to deduce. The memory of this world does not exist in my memory. There is no record of it in the Book of Epoch. Using logic, combining the stagnation of this world and the pseudo-time sea, coupled with my own memory and changes in appearance, generation after generation, it slowly raised its head and said, "Only the mythological era and the Dark Age are left with this possibility." She felt a stomachache. Why? The pseudo-time sea created by this world is very complicated. It has accumulated an endless amount of time. It has existed for a very long time, even longer than an era. Thus, it pushes the time of search to the ancient era. But in the ancient era, the god of war was still reincarnating in the lower realm. The void of this world is stagnant and has not been tainted with the aura of crossing realms. It does not exist that it came from the lower realm. Xian continued softly, so, if the timeline keeps going forward, the time when Little Star was still in the Eightfold Realm can only be in the Ancient Era. However, the God of War is the quarter moon of the Ancient Era. He does not look like this. This means that the karmic entanglement of the God of War should have nothing to do with quarter moon. According to Violet Night Flame's memory, the Shadow Emperor and quarter moon do not look different. This means that the God of War in the Ancient Era has nothing to do with the God of War, and the God of War has already reincarnated in the lower realm. The timeline can only continue to go forward. Ming Ming suddenly shuddered, and the wings on his back began to tremble. Wait a moment, there's something I've always been very concerned about. One's appearance comes from the soul, and there are only a few opportunities to change it. Moreover, the changes won't be too great. But why does Big Brother from the High Ancient Era look different from Big Brother now? And why does this God of Battle who suddenly appeared out of nowhere have the same appearance as Big Brother? The consciousness of the barrier did not stay silent for long this time. After a while, it said, I can only assume that something has happened to the God of War's soul, causing the God of War's soul in the Ancient Era to be incomplete. At this moment, the God of War who has returned after almost 70 eras is complete. Hearing this, Ziyan also said, Little Star from the primordial age wasn't complete. Then, was he a god from 2 eras before? At that time she suddenly paused and whispered, before we left, did Little Purple Soul say that Little Star's consciousness is now in the Dark Age? Find the source, the consciousness of the barrier said. Ziyan nodded. Little Xingxing knew that he wasn't born naturally in the distant Antiquity era. Instead, he was a stowaway on the reincarnation road. Perhaps he also knew that his soul wasn't complete, or perhaps he didn't know. But no matter what, these things pointed to a fact. That fact would bring him back to the origin, the Dark Age. Perhaps he was actually a person from that era? Little Purple Soul counted with his fingers and could not help but say, Big Brother has lived for 100 eras, or more than 90 eras. Xian and the others were speechless. Another era had come out of nowhere. After Old Wu finished his series of actions, he turned around and saw that Xian and the others were a little gloomy. He could not help but be taken aback. Seeing that they were also looking at the energy shadow of the God of Battle, he thought that they were thinking of the sad past. He could not help but say, the God of Battle has always been protecting the battle realm. This sentence may not be appropriate for you, because when you were in great trouble, no one came out to save you. But, well, I can't say anything. Unlike those who wholeheartedly believe in the God of Battle, I actually only see that illusory God as a spiritual pillar. Every time I see him, I feel that I can hold on for a little longer, and that the future is full of hope. Xian and the others came back to their senses and shook their heads. They were more familiar with the God of Battle than him, more than anyone else in this world. Probably. She looked at Old Wu and said, Of course we also believe in the God of Battle, but we don't believe in him. We just see him as a pillar in our hearts that will never fall. When we look at him, we feel that he can do anything. Old Wu did not catch the hidden meaning in her words, and just nodded in agreement. None of them could understand what was going on. After waiting here for a while, they were led into the obelisk by Old Wu. Xian and the others noticed that he was holding the box. They looked at each other and did not ask anything. Perhaps it was someone else's secret. Of course, this tower had a very heavy aura of time. In this world, many things seem to have been soaked in the sea of time. They were very old. They did not look old from the outside. They looked very new, but they had a heavy aura of time, as if they had carried countless years of time. Some of the buildings were a little too new. The newest one seemed to be only 1 or 2 months old, but they looked unusually messy and dirty, as if they had been abandoned for many years. This was a strange feeling. It was just like what the barrier's consciousness had sensed. This world had deity-level experts, but there weren't many core forces. It was like a hidden force that had a deity, and the rest were all people below the deity level. The middle part had disappeared, just like dynastic. The consciousness of the barrier said concisely, "For the time being, I don't understand what has happened and what kind of distortion has occurred. This world has serious dynastic. There are gods, but there are no divine emperors. The old things look very new, but the new things are very old. It's like something that will happen when the rules of time are in chaos, but it should not happen locally. If it happens at the level of rules, it should directly affect the whole world." There was only one way to the top of the obelisk. Old Wu dismissed his trusted followers and led Xian and the others straight to the top of the tower. They thought that there would be some formal palace here, but the entire top floor of the obelisk was a room used to store the crystal. When they walked in, they saw the pillar-like purple-red crystal poking in from the top of the tower. It was stuck in the groove at the top of the room. Looking up from the door of the huge room, they could see the figure floating in the crystal. Other than that, there was only one person standing under the crystal, looking up at the crystal. Old Wu led Xian and the others into the quiet room and closed the door. This room is used to store the crystal that carries the shadow of the god of war. Usually, no one would come here, but the saint god likes a quiet environment. Every time he comes here, no matter where he goes, he will eventually come here. Ziyen and the others nodded. This was indeed a grand occasion. They were simply dragged here. They didn't want to be surrounded by a large group of old men as soon as they entered the door. Then, they would be oppressed and regarded as outsiders with evil intentions. Well, there was nothing wrong with being an outsider, but they didn't have evil intentions. Anyway, when they entered the door and found that there was only one person, they were a little relieved. The hall used to store the crystal was very spacious. Other than an arc-shaped pit dug into the ceiling, there was only a square box. The walls, which were engraved with runes and formations, were pale purple and pale red under the light of the crystal. The most eye-catching thing was the imprint that represented the god of war. A large piece of it was imprinted on the floor of the hall. It was much more pleasing to the eye and was not as ugly as it was at first glance. Then, there were really no decorations. In this place, it was a competition of whose voice was louder. If one was louder than 10 meters, they would have to shout. If one was louder, they could hear their own echoes. After entering the hall, he casually scanned his surroundings, and then his gaze landed on the person under the huge crystal. He looked very young, about 30 years old, and indeed younger than old Wu. He was a little slender, and as expected, he was also wearing a black robe. This seemed to be the uniform of the people of the battle zone. He had 2 dark circles under his eyes, and at a glance one could feel that he was sleepy. It felt like he was doing his best for the sake of the battle zone, even at the cost of his own body and staying up all night to torture himself. Translator's note: this chapter was sponsored by it was a little exaggerated, but that was the meaning. They really did not expect that the so-called sacred god of the god of war was such an ordinary man. After entering the hall, the faintly discernible chanting became louder. They could already distinguish the pronunciation of the voice. If not for the fact that the chatter was so jumbled that it was difficult to hear clearly, they might have been able to make out something from it. Old Wu took a light breath and quickly walked forward. When he was halfway there, he respectfully bowed to the sacred god. Then, he quickly walked the rest of the way. Xian and the others hurriedly followed. As they approached, they constantly scanned the sacred god of the god of war. Sacred god, I have brought back the remains of the sacred weapon. Old Wu took a deep breath and handed over the square box in his hand. His hands trembled slightly as he held the box. The man called the sacred god only smiled and did not take the square box. He reached out and patted old Wu's shoulder. Old man, you've aged a little. It seems that you haven't settled down all these years. If I had known, I would have left you in the holy region instead of letting you run around and cause trouble. Old Wu's expression was a little awkward. The sacred god continued, I heard from the divine shadow that you found the remains of the sacred weapon. Old man, you did well. After that, he turned his gaze and looked at Xian and the others. He smiled. Thank you for helping this old man. Today's meeting may have been a little rushed. After all, I did not expect that sacred King Wu would be ambushed on his way back. The Guardian has been thinking about this old man for a long time. When I came here, I heard that you had saved him. Yi Shi smiled. We did it in passing. After all, we don't have a good impression of the Guardian. Ming poked the Guardian's consciousness and said in the soul, Is that guy really a god? Yes, but it's a little strange. The Guardian's face was expressionless as it said in the soul. His lifespan is not long. His soul is abnormally old, caused by rapid aging. The aging of his body is up to him. From my observation, the sacred god's soul is even older than the sacred king, even though the latter is actually much older than the former. What's wrong with him? Divinity inheritance, no, it's the inheritance of a deity. The power of a deity is passed down from generation to generation. This method allowed him to reach such a level at such a young age, but his lifespan was also inherited. When the immense power of a deity was injected into his body and soul, his original body and soul would not be able to withstand it and would explode, only to be repaired by that power again and again. The cycle would then repeat, draining his body and soul dry and turning him into his current aged state. If nothing out of the ordinary happens, this deity would only be able to live for another 20 years. The Guardian has not been very active in the past 2 years. I saw that they were secretly setting up something. However, it happened in the depths of the Guardian. There was no way to guard against it. To be honest, I did not put much hope on the remains of the sacred weapon. It was just a sustenance, a request. The sacred god suddenly said as his gaze swept across Xian and the others. His voice was steady and reliable. The Guardian's consciousness had thought that he would not understand the responsibility of a god since he was only 100 years old. But now it seemed that it was not so. If there's something I want to say, I'll just say it. The sacred god coughed softly. His gaze became serious as he stared straight at Xian and the others. Then he said, Old Wu, please leave us for a moment. I have something to discuss with these unexpected guests. Isn't that right, friends from the realm of the gods? Chapter 1186. Old Wu slipped out of the hall in a daze. He did not question the Xing deity's orders, but he did not understand why he was asked to leave. Moreover, the place the Xing deity mentioned, the legendary place. He felt that something was strange. After he closed the door, he became even more confused. He even forgot why he had come out. He could not figure it out, but he felt that he could not go wrong by standing there. Only Xian and the others were left in the hall. They faced the strange Xing deity. When the latter said the words, realm of the gods, they had already regarded him as a strange, abnormal, and somewhat strange person. Yi Shi stood in front of Xian and the others. Her forehead was slightly sweating, but her face was still calm and composed. Please calm down, guests from afar. I mean no harm. The Xing deity said softly, his face filled with a seemingly sincere and friendly smile. He slowly took a step forward, but Xian and the others collectively took a few steps back. He was a little helpless. Quite impressive. In this completely sealed and stagnant world, you actually know the words realm of the gods? Yi Shi grinned and braced herself to talk to the person in front of her. In any case, the other party knew of their origins without any reason, and was also a god. This made her extremely vigilant. In fact, in terms of the result, being vigilant or not was useless. A world that exists in legends. That's right, to us, that world only exists in ancient legends. The Xing deity pressed his chest and stretched out his other hand towards the sky. He said softly, all creatures have announced your arrival. Just as you entered this world, their faint whispers told me that after countless years, the people of the realm of the gods will descend once again. Descend once again? There were people from the realm of the gods who came to this world before? She could not help but be stunned. Who? The saint god smiled, as if he felt that this was not something worth hiding, and easily said, "Now, the two gods known as the god of war and the god of protectors are known as the god of war and the god of protectors." After so many years, perhaps very few people still remember this matter. The human race is a forgetful race. They were born to be favored by the gods and watched over by the god. However, they gradually forgot their origins and treated them as gods who should naturally exist. He turned to look at the crystal and said, "Perhaps no one would have thought that while they were forgotten, their figures became more and more mysterious and supreme. Did you know that there was no such thing as faith in this world? It was because they came here, and as time passed, they became the faith of this world." Xian clenched her jade-like hands and suddenly said, "When did they descend to this world?" "I don't know." The Xing deity shook his head and pointed at his temple. Here, all the memories of every generation of the Xing deity. I think, if it is you, you should be able to see the nature of this unusual thing of mine. The inheritance of every generation after generation? The price for this is your own lifespan? You are probably only 150 years old. She said. The Xing deity looked at her with a little surprise and nodded. "That's right. I didn't expect you to be able to see through this." She secretly stuck out her tongue. If the consciousness of the barrier had not pointed it out, they would not have been able to see through it. The more Ming heard, the more vigilant he became. "Why are you telling us this?" The Xing deity looked at them and pondered for a long time. Then, he said faintly, "In the ancient times the sky was dark. A chaotic black hole swallowed the stars and the horizon. It was not until the two gods descended that they broke the eternal darkness that sealed this world and escaped the prison of darkness. But they did not expect to fall into a new seal." The consciousness of the barrier suddenly looked up. This sky, the ones who sealed this space and this world, were those two gods? Yes or no, we can't say for sure. When they came, they wiped away the darkness of the world. When they left, they took away the key to the world. We were trapped in an eternal prison and fell silent again, waiting for the day when someone would open the door. This sentence has been recorded for a long time, but the things that happened at that time are just records to us and not real. We never know what happened at that time, and we don't know why the sky was sealed. If it was really the doing of two gods, we would at least want to know why." He paused for a moment. "This world has been sealed for far too long. It has been so long that many people have forgotten about it. Now, not many people know about it. They and I are fighting to break free from the seal of this world, but we do not know where to go. Our vision is limited, and we cannot see the outside world. We cannot see the outside world, and we cannot see the outside world. It feels a little sad. So when that myriad spirit told you, you practically jumped here to wait for us?" She asked. "Actually, I only found out after praying here. I knew that you came back with Old Wu, so I decided to wait here." Xian and Ming, sigh. She sighed heavily. "If those people in the God realm had the same awareness as you, Brother Nual would have a much easier time. What a pity, what a pity. Xing deity, eh? No, I'm talking about our world, the God realm's nonsense. Those who were trapped in prison were fighting with all their might for the outside world. However, those who had all this power had sealed their vision and become short-sighted. They could not see anything. They did not know that if they looked outside, they could not sense the danger that was coming from the outside world. Others could not even look outside if they wanted to. This world was fair. Those who were in a high position and were able to climb to that position should bear the corresponding responsibilities and have the strength to do their part, and not be long hairs that slept in the depths of the earth all day long. In fact, 90% of the gods in the God realm were about to go moldy. Ming looked at the Xing deity and said, "You want us, the people of the God realm, to come and help you break this seal?" The Xing deity glanced at her and tilted her head. "Yes, what is it?" The Xing deity waved her hand and slowly walked to the side as she said, "The reason for this world's seal is probably because it has been found, or maybe it has never been found. The people of the God realm. Well, actually, we have never prayed for anyone to come and save us. When you came, I was also very confused. I was half happy, half confused. I was worried that even the people of the God realm did not understand what was going on in this world and did not dare to have any hope. On the other hand, I hoped that the people of the God realm would really be able to break this seal, but on the other hand, I was worried that the people of the God realm would come here to do something. I'm very sorry, I've been letting my imagination run wild all this time. But when it comes to the future of this world, I can't help but think about it. The fate of this world has been tightly grasped by the throat, so we must act quickly. We don't have much time to think about too many things." Yi Shi scratched her head. "Isn't it just being sealed? At the very least, we've survived for millions of years, several dozen epochs. Is it that serious? Maybe it's that serious, maybe it's not that serious. I'm not sure." The Xing deity shook her head. "Ever since the two gods came, too many things have changed in this world. It was as if they had given this world a new life, but, for some unknown reason, it was sealed. And now, it's about to be destroyed by war. Wait a minute. Why are we talking about this again?" Yi Shi grimaced. "Weren't you the ones who started this war among yourselves? Why are you talking about those two, The Xing deity waved his hand to get her to calm down. He continued to pace around as he softly said, "To the vast majority of people in this world, many things that happen in this world are natural. They are only the inheritors who let nature take its course, inheriting history, inheriting the ancestors, inheriting the war. They don't know what the reality of this war is. The alternation of day and night, the cycle of the 4 seasons, the coexistence of eternity and destruction, the cycle of the world, the replacement of the old with the new. In the eyes of those whose lifespans are determined by the heavens, these things are strictly carried out according to the rules and are infinitely repeated. This is the limit of the vast majority of people's understanding, and they won't set their sights on anything higher." He spoke in a flat tone, without any mockery or regret. He was simply stating a fact. Because of this world's seal, there's no way around it. Generation after generation of people have tried to break free from this shackle and pass on everything to the next generation at all costs. However, this inheritance is destined to only be accepted by a small number of people. In the end, it created a distorted product like the Xing deity. Although he claims to be an inheritor, he's actually just a living carrier of history. "How many inheritors are there?" Yi Shi softly asked. "Very few." The saint deity lowered her head, her eyes flashing slightly. "There is only one saint deity guarding the domain, and every kingdom and race sandwiched between the two domains has one. There are no more than 7 or 8 of them. These 7 or 8 people are us and also them. Together, we protect everything that is left in this world, and we are also the last people who know about the changes that are happening internally in this world. Others cannot understand this level of things. This world needs war, and it needs the destruction caused by war. A peaceful life will only push this world into the abyss." I know this saying sounds like a fantasy story, but it is very difficult for ordinary people to jump out of their rigid way of thinking and think about these things. If we force them to understand these things, the best result would be a world of panic. The Xing deity tilted his head and observed the slight changes in Yi Shi's and the others' expressions. However, he ignored them and continued to speak. "Our world is being controlled by something, and its existence is causing this world to fall into a vortex of destruction, unable to break free. In our words, this is the collapse and destruction of the laws. This sealed world will eventually collapse on its own. We want to stop it, but there's nothing we can do. We can only be pushed forward helplessly by it. It started a very, very long time ago, so long ago that even history cannot reach it. Only a few records remain, and we cannot confirm the beginning of the matter. We only know that it happened not long after the two gods left and the world was sealed. At first, it was only a very small matter, such as a small life form dying abnormally, a crack appearing on a rock on the ground, or a part of the sky suddenly being covered by dark clouds. However, these areas were too small and difficult to observe. It took countless years, endless years, to expand to a point where it could finally be observed by the people of the world. The land was devoured by a destructive energy that came out of nowhere, and that energy tide swept across the surface of this world. I clearly remember that it took 20 years for 70 to 80% of the lives to be washed away, while the remaining people left the land and floated in the distant skies. The saint god paused for a moment, and after a moment of silence he continued, "No one can understand that disaster." Suddenly, half of the world was destroyed, and only a few floating islands were left floating in the sky. However, it was far from over. The energy crystals that kept the floating islands afloat for millions of years inexplicably cracked, and the floating islands that had just been in the air for a few days fell back to the ground. It was as if an invisible giant hand was preventing everyone from leaving the land, but the land was already covered by the destructive energy, and falling down meant death. Then, everything suddenly stopped. The cracked crystals miraculously repaired themselves, and the floating islands regained their balance and rose back into the sky. Seeing that he was silent again, Yishi could not help but ask, "What do you mean by suddenly stopped? The destruction was over?" The sacred god helplessly smiled and let out a long sigh. "And how could it be over? That destructive wave is still surging in the dark, and it will never end, before it destroys all life in this world." What happened at that time? Xian realized something. When a miracle happened, something special must have happened. Perhaps that was, the saint god nodded. When the floating islands fell, it naturally caused panic. The people on the falling islands screamed and struggled to leave. Fighting was unavoidable, and instead of watching themselves fall from the sky, it was better to fight for a living space on another floating island. The worst outcome was that they would all die together. I don't know how many people had this idea at the beginning, but they caused a disturbance, and then their goal was achieved. A miracle? No, I call it a joke. Everything that was a joke stopped, and the world suddenly became normal again. Even the destructive wave of the land was reduced by half. Yishi was stunned for a moment. She did not think that there was anything wrong with the saint god's narration. From the beginning to the end, the saint god had an expression of reminiscence, as if he was searching for information in the depths of his memory. Just because of a disturbance? A battle? That wave of destruction is over? You think it's unbelievable. The saint god smiled helplessly and shook his head. But that was the truth. That was the only thing that happened at that time, and there was nothing else worth paying attention to. Once the battle stopped, the destructive wave would continue, and the spread of destruction would continue. Thus, we came to the conclusion that there was some kind of power controlling this world that we could not see or control. It thirsted for destruction and wanted to destroy this world. If we did not act ourselves, it would destroy this world. That was the origin of the 10,000-year war. Xian asked. The saint god shook his head. That was when war was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. The flames of war had already been ignited before that, but it only became more and more intense. In the end, it became the 10,000-year war that you all know. There was no other way. Things were not under the control of us inheritors. If we weakened the intensity of the battle, it would come back again, and the further it went, the more intense the battle would be. In the end, it even evolved into the battle from 1,000 years ago, where the inheritors had to personally act and abide by the rules of the game. It was only after that decisive battle 1,000 years ago that its influence slowly decreased, just like the ebb and flow of the tide. Right now, it is only ebbing. So that's what happened. Shi scratched his head. Everything, was it really everything? Was it everything that happened in this world? Was it a chain reaction caused by the departure of the two gods of the divine realm, or was there some other reason none of them knew? The silver light in the eyes of the barrier's consciousness faded. He had been silent all this time, and only now did he speak. I can't sense anything that can cause such a distortion. The layer of laws is normal. In my opinion, it is normal. Now? Of course you can't see it now. The saint god was not surprised at all that they could sense. He only said, that will of destruction has been hiding for a long time, secretly influencing this world. By the time we could sense it, it had already spread its vicious claws, and this world was in danger. There's no way to solve it? After saying this, Shi smiled bitterly and waved her hand. Who knew how many generations of efforts had failed to solve it, and in the end, they had to create an inheritor, a desperate method. How could there be any way to solve it? Alright, it's already like this. The people from the divine realm that you have been waiting for. Hiss, we are right here. If you have anything you want to do or say it all at once. Shi shrugged. I can see that you definitely have some ideas. The saint god looked at her and nodded hesitantly. Well, it's not that there is no way. It's just that I don't know if this method counts as a solution, or if it is the right method. He grabbed the square box from the side and gently stroked it. The remains of a divine artifact. This divine artifact. It couldn't have been left behind by the two gods, right? Shi's eyes twitched. The saint god smiled and nodded. We don't have a way, but the two gods should have a way. They once tore apart the eternal darkness that covered the sky. Perhaps their power is strong enough to resist that wave of destruction. And if it still doesn't work, the saint god's hand paused slightly. He raised his head and softly said, History will continue, and all of this will never end. Ming looked at the wooden box, his eyes flashing with golden light. Then we first have to put it back together, if it can be restored. About that. The saint god nodded and turned to walk into the depths of the hall. Come with me. I have something to show you. Xian and the others looked at him with some confusion as he walked to the bottom of the crystal in the hall. They shook their heads. There were still many things that they did not understand, and they could not easily make a decision. It was better to follow him and take a look first. Between the heavens and the earth, a huge golden circular barrier covered the earth like an inverted bowl. The barrier surged with golden flames and released powerful divine energy. Regardless of whether it was friend or foe, everything that approached it would be purified into nothingness. This was the land of hope, once the most supreme place in the Suya continent. Now, only the ruins of destruction and the powerful divine energy that expelled all life were left. Within a radius of 100 miles, there was no vitality left. Everything was purified until nothing was left, whether it was the power on the surface or in the dark. It was also because of this reason that no one came to this dilapidated land of hope to pay homage to it. It was exposed to eternal time and gradually worn away. The divine energy here is really exaggerated. We covered his robe that had been messed up by the wind of divinity and grinned at Yun Nuashing beside him, saying, This is probably the energy left behind by a fifth heavenly layer origin expert after he died. Unwillingness and indestructible will mixed with indestructible divinity created this land of hope that is isolated from everything. Yun Nuashing lazily said and stretched. I think it's more than fifth celestial layer, but I hope it's only first celestial layer. Then at least there's still hope. A first celestial layer of origin and a fifth celestial layer of origin are two completely different concepts. One is fatal, the other is fatal. Aren't the two similar? We could not help but smile bitterly. He looked down from the sky for a while and waved his hand. Anyway, let's go in and take a look first. Chapter 1187. What was in the Land of Hope? This was a mysterious place built by Sua, a supreme being, to fight against the demonic beasts, namely the Abyss Death Mist spawn. It was a mysterious place that nurtured powerful warriors. Its history was too long ago, and no one could remember what was inside. It was ancient and mysterious, just like those mysterious forbidden areas in the divine world. The difference was that the latter would be filled with the lives of countless people, while the former would be ignored to the point of being spurned by people. Before entering this place, Yun Nuoxing and Hui had imagined what was inside. The corpse of the fifth celestial level of origin, endless energy, a divine artifact, and another part of the scepter's consciousness. Perhaps there were a few more maybes. Perhaps it was just an empty space, but that was also very possible. The two of them passed through the golden barrier without any warning, and the inverted golden bowl did not stop them, allowing them to enter the space that had been sealed for countless years. Then, Yun Nuoxing and Hui saw the situation inside at the same time, and instinctively closed their mouths, wanting to run. That was just an instinctive reaction from being startled. When they saw it carefully, they calmed down. Then, the two of them looked at each other, and their cheeks could not help but twitch. What filled the entire Land of Hope was an endless black aura, drowning the sky like a curtain of darkness. Ugly abyssal death mist spawns filled the entire space, churning violently like a pot of boiling oil. Countless strange-looking things rolled on the ground, and their huge bodies cast unsettling shadows on the light of the barrier. They condensed into black crystals on the ground, and quickly wriggled into all kinds of strange things that made people want to faint at a glance. There were monsters with 7 hands and 8 legs, 3 heads and 6 arms, like a strange creature that was a mixture of humans and giant demons. Their huge bodies were constantly spewing out smoke, and in the smoke, black crystals fell out and turned into new abyssal death mist spawns. Yun Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other silently. They really did not expect this place to become the lair of the abyssal death mist spawns, and their numbers had clearly reached the point where they could form a stable environment. They multiplied endlessly, devouring the energy within the barrier without stopping for millions of years. If that's the case, this place should be overcrowded. I don't think the number of people here can fill up this space. This isn't an infinite space. Hui whispered in Yun Nuoxing's ear. Yun Nuoxing looked around and looked into the distance. After a while, a look of realization appeared on her face. If there's consumption, then it naturally won't be full. He pointed into the distance. Hui glanced over there and immediately understood what he meant by consumption. Far away, beyond the area sealed off by the endless army of darkness, perhaps the center of the Land of Hope, there was an area shining with golden light. The golden light reached the sky, and the golden light spread out like an ocean. Unfortunately, the ocean of light couldn't go far before it slammed into the black mountain wall. The two energies seemed to have a grudge against each other. In an instant there was a huge reaction. The flames of the explosion were very dazzling. It was like the detonation of small suns. However, they were blocked by the death fog of the abyss and couldn't shine out. I can't sense any signs of life. I don't know if it's affected by the death fog of the abyss. Hui frowned. He looked at the rolling black ground under his feet and his eyebrows twitched. Fortunately, he hadn't eaten for a few days. Otherwise, he would have vomited. He wasn't afraid of these things, but it was too disgusting to look at. Courage and disgust were two completely different things. These strange things were purely used to cause mental attacks on the enemy. The energy here is very chaotic. Of course, I can't sense. And we've been noticed. As soon as Yun Nuoxing's voice fell, Hui immediately looked down. He saw that some of the crooked things crawling on the ground slowly raised their head. Those eyes saw them. Then, an incredible scene appeared. The army of darkness that was walking towards the golden light pillar in the distance stopped and slowly turned back to look at them. For a moment, the evil aura in this space soared several times. The explosive black aura that soared into the sky almost suffocated Hui to death. Huey's face twitched. They didn't emit any aura at all. It was understandable that they were discovered by the monsters under their feet. But those in the distance, unless they had eyes on the back of their heads, how could they detect their existence? Feng, these guys are sharing their minds? Yun Nuoxing took out her scepter and gestured twice. From the performance just now, this is very likely. But I don't think now is the time to discuss this. Don't panic, don't panic. In your words, they're just shiny cannon fodder. Hui grinned, revealing a bright smile. As he spoke cheerfully and wittily, he waved his hand, and an energy that was terrifying enough to reverse time hit the ground like a hurricane. It then turned into a monstrous energy wave that swept towards the distance with a rumble. In an instant, it wiped out hundreds of thousands of abyssal death mist derivations, suppressing their roars that were stuck in their throats back into the void. Boom! A huge and indescribable energy storm exploded in the depths of the Land of Hope. The dazzling energy storm was like a colorful tornado that connected the heavens and the earth, causing the golden energy barrier to ripple. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands or even millions of abyssal death mist derivatives were annihilated. Yun Nuoxing put away her scepter and lightly tapped it in the void. The faint sound of wind chimes echoed in their ears. She looked at the dark army that was suddenly annihilated without any expression. They were indeed not panicking. These were just shiny cannon fodder. If the two of them had to be flustered just to deal with these things, then they might as well just surrender when the people of the underworld came knocking on their door in the future. The two of them walked side by side in the sky step by step, slowly moving towards the golden light pillar in the depths of the Land of Hope. Every time they moved, it was enough to wipe out the space within 100 miles of them. Yun Nuoxing looked on expressionlessly as the ugly monsters with ears were destroyed in the churning energy wave. He could not help but frown. He had never seen these abyssal death mist derivatives before. They were different from the void mist derivatives he saw in the present realm of the gods. These were much larger and more terrifying. Don't be fooled by what he said about shiny cannon fodder. In the dark army that was locked in the Land of Hope, there were monsters that were comparable to gods. It was just that they could not be used in front of the two of them. Feng, it's not good to be in a daze here. I know you trust me a lot, but you should be more vigilant. Hui reminded softly. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. I'm thinking about something. You just need to know that I trust you. Do you need me to even deal with these little cannon fodder? Fine. What are you thinking again? Isn't it because this place is weird? My reflexes and probing abilities aren't as strong as yours. You trust me, but the truth is, I can be unreliable occasionally. The two of them were talking about two different topics at the same time like lunatic. This was the victory of countless years of tacit understanding. Yun Nuoxing glanced at him. His worries were not unfounded. The world they were in had been modified by the people of the underworld into a core to nurture the abyssal death mist derivative. There were many distortion points, so much so that it made one's hair stand on end. Even if the two of them represented the highest combat power in the realm of the gods. Well, there was a saying that went capsized in the gutter. It applied to anyone, anywhere. If the dark army here were to leak out, I'm afraid the entire Suja continent would be devoured in an instant. I can sense a few monsters here that are not inferior to heavenly god-tier power. Although they are less than half of a heavenly god-tier power, a few of them together is still quite a force to be reckoned with. These are all high-level cannon fodder. Huey's gaze swept across the depths of the space, and he turned to Yun Nuoxing. What did you think of just now? As you said, there is only one heavenly god-tier life form in the Suja continent. It is impossible to stop them. However, the barrier of the Land of Hope has stood for so many years, and the divine power here is still fighting without sleep. This battle has been going on for an unimaginably long time. If we did not come, it would have gone on forever. Yun Nuoshing said faintly. I'm thinking about the Land of Hope. What do you think that pillar of light is? The two of them were talking offline again. If anyone were to listen in, they would faint at any time. I bet a stick of candied hawthorn that it is the corpse of the Empyrean god of origin. Hui grinned. What do you think? I don't know. Yun Nuoshing shook his head, which surprised Hui greatly. He rarely gave such an answer. There are too many anomalies in this world. I was sure of it a few times, but in the end I denied it. Without seeing it with my own eyes, I don't dare to make a judgment easily. I just feel that the fall of the Most High back then is definitely not that simple. After Hui finished listening to him, he held the back of his head with both hands and walked step by step with him in the sky. With a thought, a wave of divinity energy that was countless times more powerful than the golden beam of light rushed out in all directions like a tsunami, forming a huge divinity domain. Those manifestations that crashed into this domain all strangely disappeared without a trace, as if they had been decomposed into air. A huge rumbling sound came from the sky. A huge black demonic sword that was tens of thousands of feet long descended from the sky with a power that seemed to be able to cut the void in half. A huge shadow slammed on the ground, turning into countless strange long swords. Disgusting broken limbs were embedded in them, and there was a huge eyeball embedded in the sword hilt. Thousands of demonic swords swept towards Huey's domain. A new model, huh? It's something. Hui looked at the huge demonic sword and smiled faintly. He did not pay too much attention to it. He just walked forward with Yun Nuoshing. Those things could not touch his domain anyway. Boom. Accompanied by a huge tremor, thousands of demonic swords and the huge demonic sword fiercely hit Huey's domain, causing him to widen his eyes in shock. Damn. This is a law-breaking attack? Ordinary attacks would not directly touch his divine domain, just like how attacks could not deliberately cause any damage to the air. The energy that could touch his domain all carried the power of the natural order. Yun Nuoshing held the scepter horizontally behind his back with both hands behind his back. As he walked step by step, the scepter constantly made the sound of wind chimes. He did not stop from beginning to end. A big guy has come to support. It's comparable to half a heavenly god-tier plaything. Be careful not to fail miserably. After crossing a layer of chaotic boundary, the natural order here became abnormally blurry again. An abnormally deranged dark thing was lurking in the chaotic atmosphere. Through its blurry figure, one could see the golden light pillar that reached the sky. It was still very far away. The closer they got to it, the more rampant the power of the abyssal death mist became. Behind that madness and darkness, there was a phenomenon of energy stacked and entangled. The space here became blurry. A black mountain that was so huge that it could swallow an entire planet rose from the ground. Those dark shadows spewed out endless power. The black energy spread wildly. In the shadows, something seemed to be happening. Crack, crack, that huge demonic sword sank a little into Huey's divine domain. His domain was actually broken a little, which made him feel shocked. This doesn't make sense. What just happened? The power of the spawn has been strengthened? Yun Nuoshing stopped for the first time. He turned around and looked into the distance. He looked outside the barrier. His eyes flashed slightly. Resonance, the power of the abyssal death mist. The power of the spawn in this land of hope has resonated with the abyssal death mist outside. I can feel the restlessness of the thoughts, the restlessness of the entire world of light. Huey's face twitched. This was too much of a cheat. Gathering the power of the abyssal death mist in the entire world of light to deal with them. Wow, his domain had sunk a few meters. Seems like they really don't want us to go over. Hui grimaced. Although they don't want us to go over and rescue them, The meaning is the same. Troublesome. Yun Nuoxing yawned lazily. He held the scepter in his right hand and held it horizontally beside his body. Then, he knocked on the void forcefully. With a loud bang, a monstrous energy burst out from the void behind him. It turned into a meteor shower and fell to the ground. The dazzling destructive energy cut through the dark clouds, tearing the continuous stretch of abyssal death mist and the spawn into countless pieces. However, before Yun Nuoxing and Hui could take a step forward, the gap there was instantly filled up by an even more frenzied energy. Those gaps disappeared without a trace. Silence. Yun Nuoxing raised his scepter and the elements of nirvanic extermination surged out from his body. A cold wind swept past him and circled him, gradually turning into a dark storm that revolved around him. The energy that was even more violent than the abyssal death mist collided with the black abyss in a head-on manner. The huge demon sword and the countless smaller demon swords were pushed back by the elements of nirvanic extermination. There were constantly manifestations and demon swords that were torn to pieces, but more and more would be added in an instant, and more. It's almost the threshold of usable energy. Be careful. Don't break this barrier. Hui held the wind that was dancing wildly in the wind. He looked at the black energy that made his heart palpitate as well. An imperceptible worry flashed across his eyes. Yun Nuoxing nodded. They didn't dare to use too much energy, so they could only use some simple methods to destroy the enemy. They absolutely couldn't use large-scale energy destruction. At that time, the barrier of the Land of Hope would shatter. It seemed that it was much easier for the internal energy to destroy it than the external energy. Once the barrier was gone, the dark army stored here would rush to the entire Suja continent like a flood. Overlooking this land from the starry sky, one would see a black spot crazily spreading in all directions. Of course, that was not what they were worried about. They had 1,000 ways to suppress or destroy the abyssal death mist spawn. But they needed to see clearly what was left behind in the depths of the Land of Hope. It may be important, it may not be important, but no matter what, they had to take a look. We can't kill it. The power of resonance is too strong. The main thing is that the barrier will collapse if we use more power. Yun Nuoxing frowned and withdrew the elements of silence. Without any obstruction, the spawns and the abyssal death mist spawn pounced on Hui's divine domain even more crazily. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, waving their ugly bodies to hit that layer of the domain. Soon, the once smooth domain was full of bumps and hollows. Should we just charge in? Hui raised his head. Those huge, ugly manifestations were pressing down on his divinity domain. Every punch landed on his flesh. Those fellows who had recklessly rushed into his domain just now were already using the impact of rules to beat up his domain. This made him silently raise the threat level of the abyssal death mist manifestations by several levels. He looked towards the depths of the Land of Hope. The massive abyssal death mist spawn storm was pressing towards him like a mountain range. In that obscure darkness, he could vaguely see countless hideous faces, huge bodies, and countless disgusting and bizarre things dancing wildly. If what they saw before was a bunch of lunatics ready to strike, then now, millions of lunatics were showing their ferocious side, using a cheating method to slap their energy at his face. I think, Hui said weakly. Yun Nuoxing then said, the energy level has increased by several levels. That big guy, who is comparable to a heavenly god, is about to make a move again. Hui staggered. Why is the abyssal death mist here so powerful? Millions of years. After countless years of confrontation, there must be something wrong with the abyssal death mist here. Didn't you notice that your divine energy did not cause any great damage to them? That's when they all switched to using the power of rules. That can't be right? Hui was stunned after saying that. The abyssal death mist here. The Dark Army's rule-breaking power was already cheating, and now they even have mind-sharing and a weak resistance to divinity. Perhaps we can see such a scene in the depths of the abyssal death mist, but there's obviously something unexpected here. Yun Nuoshing looked at the divine domain that was constantly sinking, as if it could not bear the weight, and collapsed. Her eyes flickered slightly. We can't wait any longer. Moving in this place is very restrictive. Let's go straight to the depth. As Yun Nuoshing's voice fell, Hui shuddered. Before he could say anything, he felt his shoulder being clasped, and a layer of hazy colorful light floated over his body. Then the space around him began to distort and collapse. Even the light was cut off. The rules around them were also constantly collapsing and decreasing until they finally disappeared. Everything returned to nothingness. In just a few seconds they had disappeared. The divine domain disappeared in an instant. Countless abyssal death mist and manifestations swarmed in like a black sea that was flowing backwards into the empty space. They quickly filled up the area and then pounced on nothing. They looked angrily at the space that was filled with them. Unable to find a target to vent their anger, they staggered towards the depths of the land of hope. That huge demonic sword also changed direction. Even though they strangely had thoughts, they obviously did not understand what had just happened. After losing their target, they returned to their irrational state. In the center of the massive abyssal death mist storm, it was a calm area. It was like the eye of the storm was approaching a windless zone. The bizarre nightmarish scene had been left behind. Now, there was only this calm space in front of them. Of course, that was an illusion. The center of the storm formed by the abyssal death mist gave an illusion of excessive tranquility. However, the constantly fluctuating layer of faint light on the two revealed the truth here. They were being attacked by malevolent energy at every moment, and even a faint sense of danger was born in their hearts. If the sense of danger was switched to reality, it would cause them no more harm than a sneeze. In the dark surroundings, even though they could not see anything, the malevolent energy did not diminish. They were still in the center of the storm, and this time they had entered the center of the abyssal death mist. Chapter 1188. The abyssal death mist was a formless, untouchable, strange thing. Its existence and its power were distortions. The distortions were like some kind of irreparable flaw and loophole that had existed since the birth of this world. It only had one kind of power, and that was the invisible destruction of the rules, causing everything that depended on the correct rules to fall apart. The tidal wave of derivatives was just some kind of absurd thing that had been distorted and projected into the world. It was not surprising that they had the power to destroy the rules. They only existed for one purpose: to eliminate all order and rules, to destroy, and to cause the entire world to fall into a frenzy of self-destruction. Just like the attack that Yun Nuoshing and the others felt at this moment. In the space that was as dark as ink, something was stirring. Some kind of unobservable thing was moving around. It was pitch black, and it felt like the light had lost its vitality. The gloomy and dark space seemed to have everything, but also seemed to have nothing. A frenzied and dark energy flowed like a long river, causing the scalps of those who felt it to tingle. There was no way to observe anything in the pitch-black space. The only source of light was the energy that surged around the two of them. They calmly looked at the space, and did not feel despair at falling into the center of this madness. They were even calmly talking about the madness that filled their surroundings. They could not use their eyes to observe the thing in front of them, but their souls could feel that there was a large amount of chaotic and irrational thing surging around them. They were in its stomach. The surging energy in their bodies was constantly fighting back. Their senses were constantly reminding them that something was attacking, eroding their energy. Even though they could not see any physical contact, even though they could not see anything in their sight, the information sent back by their senses could not be wrong. The probing of their souls also told them that they were being attacked by some kind of unknown energy. How did you jump into this godforsaken place? He calmly looked at the blurry black image in front of him, and could not help but ask. I don't know. Don't ask me. Even if you ask, I don't know. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and said irresponsibly, I just randomly picked a nearby place to jump. God knows how I ended up here. The dark energy was filled with something illusory, like shining stars, and the blurry images of the stars could be clearly seen. This place was like an endless starry sky. The thick, dark, cloud-like energy twisted into a cluster like vines, spreading to every corner of the sea of stars. It looked like a huge tree, standing in the middle of the sea of stars, and what shuttled between the vines were endless stars. Inconceivably, in the center of this weird storm, he actually felt a weak existence of order. The death fog of the abyss should be some kind of error, some kind of defect that was formed when the world was born, just like his elements of chaos. As chaos, the chaos that was nothing at the beginning of the world was the original nothingness, the nothingness, nothing, but it could represent everything that the world could show. Look, it was so similar to what he was seeing now. In the center of this violent thing that filled the Grand Yuan realm, there was a scene that could only be seen in the world of order. That was the light of thousands of stars shining. Feng, do you see that? Those things. Hui slowed down his breathing. He originally thought that the death fog of the abyss represented death, and that it was the aftermath of the annihilation of all things, but today he saw a complete star field in the center of the death fog of the abyss. Probably a complete star field. The power of his soul shuttled through this chaotic and boundless space without any hindrance, which surprised Hui a little. He quickly calmed down and let his soul shuttle through the abyss star field quickly. Feng, this place seems endless. You feel it too? Yun Nuoxing nodded. She looked into the distance, her nose twitched slightly, and suddenly showed a very strange expression. Guess what I found? Hui glanced at her. The bread that you didn't finish last month? Yun Nuoxing. Ahem, I'm just kidding. What did you feel? Hui coughed dryly and quickly put on a serious face before he was beaten up. He knew that Yun Nuoxing's reaction speed was much faster than his. Maybe he really saw something incredible in this abyss star field. Yun Nuoxing stared at him with an unfriendly expression for a while until Hui shivered. She then looked away and said softly, I felt an aura from the middle plane. Middle plane? Hui was slightly stunned. But we are in the lower plane now. Where did the aura of the middle plane come from? It can't be that something from the middle plane has drifted here. Wait a minute, did you feel the aura of something from the middle plane, or the aura of the middle plane itself? It's like the aura you feel when you are in the middle plane when you are cruising in the void, Yun Nuoxing said very seriously. It's definitely not something that drifted here. He stretched out his finger and pointed into the depths. I'm sure that if we walk to the end in this direction, we will definitely reach the middle plane. Hui shuddered. F***ck me. This abyssal death mist can't be something like a passageway, right? Yun Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. The word passageway brought up a scene in his mind. At that time, he had talked with Azurite about a certain Empyrean god of origin in the Dark Age who had fought his way into the underworld through the abyssal death mist. In other words, the abyssal death mist could very well have the function of a passageway. For example, they could stand in the center of the abyssal death mist without being harmed. There must be many such people in the underworld as well. No wonder when the abyssal death mist disappears, they come out with the Dark Army. This thing has such a function. Yun Nuoxing murmured to herself. What? Hui did not hear her murmur and looked at her curiously. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. After thinking for a while, he told her about it. Hui was silent for a while after hearing it. His eyes wandered around the abyssal star region for a while. But we can't find where the underworld is. Even if we know where it is, can we still fight our way in? According to what you said, there are people at the level of Yuanshi in the underworld, and that's their home ground. No matter how I look at it, we are no match for them. Yun Nuoxing shrugged. I'm just saying. Hui heaved a long sigh. Looking at the space, he said, I feel like I'm looking at the void when it was first formed. At the beginning of the world, at the beginning of the chaos, the void came. You mean the void when it was first formed? Yun Nuoshing pondered for a while and shook his head. The void when it was first formed wasn't so violent and crazy. The abyssal death mist and my elements of chaos are the mistakes and defects that appeared when the world was first formed. They are like termites in a house. Their inventions are nothing in the whole Deyuan realm, but they can gnaw the Deyuan realm full of holes. This was a graveyard where rules were buried. All order and reality collapsed into nothingness here. Order and chaos clashed endlessly here. They would not stop until one side was destroyed. However, neither side would stop. This was a never-ending battle. This battle originated from a life's obsession. It also belonged to all living beings in the Deyuan realm, to every thinking life and to this world. Yun Nuoshing's eyes flickered. He couldn't help but frown. Some memories buried deep in his heart surfaced involuntarily. He wanted to suppress them, but he couldn't. He couldn't help but recall what happened at that time. The more he tried to stop himself from recalling, the clearer the memory became. It made him even more agitated. This dark and lonely space kept overlapping with that scene. Finally, they overlapped. He saw that day again, in the depths of the void. He entered the endless sea of rules and saw the thing that made him restless. It was really similar. The aura that spread out from the center of the abyssal death mist was also very similar to that space. It was very similar to the atmosphere of that day. It was also after that he became abnormally irritable. In the end, he paid the price of 2 primordial realms and countless lives before he regained his calmness. Now, when he went to those 2 primordial realms again, all he could see was the nothingness of destruction. Nothing would exist. There was nothing. All the stars had been extinguished. Order. There was no order to speak of. He was no longer a life controlled by order. Everything in the mortal world belonged to order. They lived in this world, in the Deyuan realm. They faced birth, old age, illness, and death. After death, they reincarnated and returned to the relay station. The cycle repeated over and over again, until one day, when this spirit became excessively weak, he would face true death and his soul would be torn apart in the 8 primordial realms. Everyone was moving forward. Every life was moving forward. However, he had stopped there long ago. Eternal life, eternity, carrying this so-called eternity, this world didn't allow him to die. Therefore, he stopped in his tracks and stood there blankly. He watched as the stream of people brushed past his shoulders and continued moving forward. Death, to him, was just a beautiful extravagant hope. So annoying, so boring. Everything in this world was annoying, everything was boring, and only destruction could change this boredom. He liked this feeling very much. Phone. Huey's voice sounded in his ears. Yun Nuoshing suddenly came back to his senses. The overlapping illusions disappeared, and the whispers echoing in his ears also disappeared. The scene in front of him became clear again. They were still in the Abyss Star territory. Endless light spots flashed in front of him, like another starry sky. Taking a closer look, it didn't look like the scene he saw that day. It was just a little similar. It was also dark, but there were light spots. The depths of the sea of rules were not completely empty. Phone. As if he felt that Yun Nuoshing hadn't come back to his senses, we called out again, which made Yun Nuoshing slowly come back to his senses. This time, he was completely awake. He saw Huey's anxious face swaying back and forth in front of him. Yun Nuoshing even pressed down on his shoulders and shook him hard. He suddenly found the reason why he woke up. It turned out that he was shaken awake. If you keep shaking me, I'm going to faint. Yun Nuoshing shook his head and said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hui let out a sigh of relief when he heard Yun Nuoshing speak. He patted Yun Nuoshing's shoulder and said, you just fell into your memories. I know. I knew it when the illusions appeared in front of me. But, I couldn't break free. Yun Nuashing held his head and shook it slightly. He smiled at Hui, who still had a worried look on his face, and said, "It's much better now." Hui looked him up and down for a while and muttered suspiciously, "What did you think of just now?" The element of nirvana moved spontaneously. The energy that was brewing just now almost tore this place into pieces. Yun Nuashing was stunned for a moment. Only then did he realize that the scene in front of him didn't just return to normal. It seemed to have become a little more fragile. He could poke a hole in space with a gentle poke of his finger. Hovering in the death fog of the abyss, there was also a similar black, cloud-like energy. It was his chaos. Element of nirvana. "What did you think of just now?" we asked again. "All things are born of order and die of chaos. These billions of worlds exist in the void. Something is born out of nothing. There is no beginning and no end. What we face, what we bear." Stop. Alright, you don't have to say any more. Huey's head was hurting from listening to Yun Nuashing. He waved his hand hard to stop Yun Nuashing. Yun Nuashing smiled silently. That was not it. However, he couldn't tell him that it was something that would happen in the future. The day he went deep into the sea of rules, the day he came into contact with the sins of the world. He didn't want to tell anyone. It was meaningless. It was a fact that could not be changed. The future could not be changed. The past could not be changed. It would never disappear. That was the sin of the entire Deyuan realm. It determined all his future. But those were meaningless. There was no need to tell anyone. Yun Nuashing tilted his head and looked at the space. He then looked at Hui and asked, "How about you? How did you break free?" "I wasn't affected too much. Those inferior illusions were too easy to see through," Hui said in a matter-of-fact tone. When Yun Nuashing heard that, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had forgotten that this guy was equivalent to the embodiment of sunlight. How could he be affected by such inferior illusions? Those false illusions had no effect on him. The ones who would be affected were people like him, people who had darkness in their hearts and embraced darkness. Although it made me see some uncomfortable things. Yun Nuashing grinned. But it also made me see some, even more unpleasant things. Today is really bad. It made me recall so many unpleasant things. Yun Nuashing's right palm faced downwards. He slowly raised it high. The elements of nirvanic extermination crazily condensed into a ball of condensed light in his palm. His palm brought the ball of light down and slammed into the abyss star region. Suddenly, the space shook violently. The twinkling stars in the distance were extinguished one by one. The black mist-like space shook violently. Under Huey's stunned gaze, this seemingly real space shattered with a loud bang. Bang, as if they had been hit by a stick, a muffled sound rang in their heads. It made Yun Nuashing and Hui feel a little dizzy. They opened their eyes abruptly. What they saw was a space wrapped in brilliant golden light. The golden light pillar went straight to the sky. From time to time, golden light pillars would erupt from the ground in the distance, spewing out golden and flame-like energy flames. They extended all the way to the end of their line of sight. Finally, they saw a touch of black. A ferocious giant demonic beast waved its huge limbs and used its ugly body to crash into the golden barrier. It was burned to ashes by the golden flame-like energy. Boom! The ground shook violently. The sound of magma erupting echoed in their ears. Huge golden flame pillars spewed out from the ground. They seemed to be standing in a volcano. Wow, that space is fake? Hui was really surprised this time. Not really. That may be a more realistic scene in the illusion. At that moment, I really felt the breath from the middle plane. Yun Nuashing shook his head. With that jump, we had already entered the center of the land of hope. That is, here, where we saw the light pillar erupt. But what awaited us was only an illusion of the abyss death fog. Huey's gaze swept around. His eyes were a little dazed. This place was the land of hope? The most sacred place in the Suja continent? Are you kidding me? The land of hope. There is no hope. What is left here is only an illusion. Chapter 1189. The land of hope, once the most sacred place on the Suja continent, was now filled with endless abyssal death mist spawns. It was the land of nightmares. Yun Nuoshing and Hui saw a place with endless divine power in the depths of the land of hope. They thought it would be the last salvation of the land of hope, so they came here to look for it. They did not expect to find a deeper abyss in the abyss. The dazzling golden divine power spread far and wide, forming a domain that kept spitting out golden divine energy. Standing there, one would feel as if they were standing in the middle of a group of volcanoes. The land was purified by that layer of divine energy, and the closer one was to the center, the stronger the purification. The ground here had a brittle texture as if it had been scorched by high-temperature flames for countless years, and a light tap of the toes would turn a large portion of the land into ashes. Below, even more brittle land would appear, as if the land within a radius of several thousand meters had become the earth piled with dust. Closer to the center, the nightmare began to appear. Black vines broke through the shackles of the ground and stretched out in the sky, releasing a black aura like water ripples, spreading to every corner of the land of hope. The vines stood on the ground like a jungle, exuding the smell of nightmares. The red light and runes flashed with ominous light. If an ordinary person looked at it for too long, they would lose their mind and become a part of the nightmares outside, and then be torn to pieces by the divine aura in the next second. The dancing black jungle kept releasing distorted light. This was the center of the land of hope, and also the deepest part of the nightmare. Countless thick black vines surrounded a sarcoma, and through the red light refracted from the inside, Yun Nuoshing and the others could vaguely see a human figure wrapped in the sarcoma. Hui touched Yun Nuoshing's arm. "Phone, do you see that?" "I see it. I see it very clearly." Yun Nuoshing's expression turned serious and nodded. "It's the same aura as that little girl. If she's not lying and really is a descendant of the Most High, then there's no doubt that this abyssal death mist spawn in front of us is that Most High." He thought for a moment and added, "Even if it's not him, it should be a mutated corpse." That battle back then was really tragic. The Empyrean god of origin had 100 ways to kill himself before he was killed. Now it seems that he didn't even have the time to self-destruct. The people of the underworld personally took action. Hui nodded. His gaze was a little complicated and helpless. Then what kind of gods did they send to pin a 5th-level Empyrean god of origin to the ground? How would I know? You're asking me, Yun Nuoshing had just laughed bitterly when his expression changed slightly. An unprecedentedly powerful energy reaction instantly appeared in his and Huey's soul. Some kind of extremely crazy and dark energy spread into their souls, causing them to raise their heads abruptly. This energy was even crazier than Yun Nuoshing's element of annihilation. Just the breeze that blew against their faces made them feel as if they were falling into an abyss. Hui subconsciously grabbed Yun Nuoshing's shoulder, and the two of them rushed out. At the same time, countless black spikes suddenly protruded from the ground, extending toward the sky and entangling the black tumor. The surrounding space was wildly distorted, and most of the space collapsed. The rules that had already collapsed turned into nothingness, almost returning to the state of nothingness at the beginning of the world. Not good. That thing is really not good. Hui had goosebumps all over his body. People of their level could still feel such a threat? What kind of monster had the Empyrean god of origin been transformed into by the abyssal death mist? A very dangerous aura. This is the aura of countless worlds collapsing. He alone contains the aura of annihilation of countless worlds collapsing and the laws of entanglement. Yun Nuoshing muttered to himself for a moment. He looked at the increasingly shocking and terrifying aura coming from the black tumor and could not help but have goosebumps. This aura has probably fused with the aura of many worlds. Stop sighing. We seem to have woken this guy up. Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. What do we do now? What can we do? Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and said, should we cut off this place and throw it into the depths of the void? This place is sealed by laws. Can you cut it off? Hui rolled his eyes. Yun Nuoshing muttered to himself for a while before nodding seriously. I can, but what do we do after we cut it off? Hui was clearly startled. Let's cut it off if we can. We can't use it here anyway. We can move it around in the void. Anyway, let's take it one step at a time. Otherwise, what else can we do? I don't think leaving this thing on the Suja continent will do us any good. They must have touched something that broke the eternal stagnation of this place. Otherwise, such a situation would not have happened. Although they did not know if that big guy had anything to do with the most exalted of Suja, it was clearly ready to cause a ruckus with Yun Nuoshing and Hui. How big would the commotion caused by 3 Empyrean gods be? Moreover, 2 Empyrean gods of origin and 1 Empyrean god of origin, whose aura was not weaker than theirs, could easily destroy the world. Oh, to destroy half of the void, unless one side was crushing the other, the commotion would be so great that the entire void could feel it. Now that they were in this place, it would not be fun if the people of the underworld sensed it. Bang! The black vines danced crazily in the air. The black aura was mixed with a violent power that could destroy the void. Madness. Endless madness made Yun Nuoshing and the other 2 feel the coldness of death. They were all too familiar with this aura. Even they themselves had felt this aura countless times. It was an aura that they could often feel when walking on the edge of order and collapse. Countless times, countless times. Maple, hurry up and get him and us out of here. That tyrannical aura made Hui Dou's expression change slightly. That feeling really had the aura of a middle plane. He could clearly feel that Maple's nirvanic elements were weaker in the face of this tyrannical aura. How many worlds' rules did this guy eat? How many worlds had the abyssal death mist destroyed? How many worlds were there in the entire lower plane? Now that it had been pushed to the middle plane, the number of destroyed worlds was an astronomical number, not to mention the lives and many more things that had fallen. Yun Nuoshing didn't say anything. She had already taken action before Hui's reminder. Hui almost subconsciously pulled out the Netherworld Ruined Sword. The Netherworld Ruined Sword. He stared blankly at the purplish-black greatsword in his hand. He froze for a second and shook his head violently. Now was not the time to think about this. 6 dazzling divine rings appeared behind him. The dazzling light cast a shadow on his back, making him look like a god descending to the mortal world. He raised the Netherworld Ruined Sword high and forcefully stabbed it into the ground. The purplish-black light bloomed on the ground and quickly spread out, including Yun Nuoshing and Hui's wildly dancing black vines. The space in front of them flickered with a dazzling light, causing Hui to close his eyes involuntarily. Yun Nuoshing suddenly let out a soft cry of surprise. She felt a little strange, but it was too late to do anything. The light in front of them flickered wildly and swallowed them. In the next second, an endless galaxy suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the starry sky of this world. The distant stars painted the eternal light, and it was magnificent. Hui felt the gravity disappear. He opened his eyes and subconsciously opened his rule domain to envelop both of them. Then, he saw an empty, cold, and dead galaxy. He couldn't help but say, "You actually cut that piece off. But didn't you say that we would be teleported into the void? How did we end up in the starry sky? Feng, what's wrong?" He turned his head and saw Yun Nuoshing's face full of cold sweat. He could not help but be stunned. He then looked at the purple-black giant sword in his hand and understood. If there's nothing else, it's better not to use these things. It's not very reliable for people of our level to use the Netherworld Ruined Sword. Although the consciousness of the divine weapon has been dormant for countless years, It's inevitable that you'll suffer a backlash if you use it rashly. You still, didn't you? Yun Nuoshing shook his head and interrupted Huey's guess. Although the latter said a lot of things that made him very concerned, he really did not suffer a backlash from the netherworld ruined sword. Yun Nuoshing looked up at the starry sky, her face full of cold sweat. Just now, there was an inexplicable force that affected me. I got the order wrong. I threw the Suja continent into the void. Huey's eyes widened. He opened his mouth and said in an extremely shocked tone, "Huh? We're still in the same place." Yun Nuoshing wiped the sweat off her face and smiled bitterly. But the Suja continent was thrown into the void position that I wanted to teleport to. Hui was speechless. Yun Nuoshing was still sweating profusely. He looked at the nearby star field. The twisted black forest had been brought out as well. It looked like it had been successfully cut out. Other than that, there was a star in the distant region of about 2 trillion force points. It was a dying star that emitted a bright red light. It was the only thing in the vicinity of several light years. As for what was behind them, Yun Nuoshing turned around and looked behind them. The huge abyss black hole emitted a deep and hollow echo. It was dark, deep, and buried endless worlds. It was a huge tomb that was very close to them. Perhaps they could reach it with one hand. It was so dark that it made people's hearts palpitate. It was so dark that it made people go crazy. The dark jungle was still emitting an unusually powerful energy. The spreading energy shockwaves continued to shake their energy barriers and law domains. The black wind permeated the star system, and Yun Nuoshing and the others could not help but have the illusion of a cold chill. A very powerful domain was spreading and colliding with their domains. It seemed that the other party was ready, but they had not seen that person so far. Buzz buzz, the ground under their feet had already shattered. There were several ways to communicate in space. This kind of sound that was wrapped in the power of law and rushed into their ears or minds was one of the simplest and most violent ways. Yun Nuoshing and Hui looked at the dark jungle that was still twisting wildly in the star system. They looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. "How did you get the place wrong?" Hui rubbed his hands together. He calmly accepted this fact. In fact, it might be better to be left in this star system. No matter how big of a commotion they made, they would not be noticed by the outside world. The premise was that they could not break the world barrier of this world. However, he still wanted to know why Maple, who was always reliable, would make a mistake. Yun Nuoshing raised the Netheruan's sword and gestured in the air. It was disturbed by a force. By the time I realized it, that force had already locked it and us in this space. Back then, I used a lot of energy to forcefully cut and teleport Suja, which caused it to be thrown into the void. I'm afraid it will melt in an instant. No, the Suja continent has a layer of powerful energy barrier. Although it has been in disrepair for a long time and cannot stop the appearance of the demonic beasts, it has no problem blocking the erosion of the void. That Supreme Ones. Hui nodded, a little surprised. Then when this is over, let's help them fix the barrier. At the same time, we can also clean up the abyssal death mist derivatives. Yun Nuoshing turned her head and was silent for a moment. Let's talk about it after this is over. Hui nodded and looked at the dark forest in front of him. Or rather, he looked at the person hidden in the deepest part of the forest. Suddenly, he took a step forward and put on a bright smile. Hey buddy, if you wake up, how about we have a chat? Buzz buzz buzz. The annoying sound kept echoing in his head, like the buzzing of mosquitoes circling back and forth in his ears. It seemed that the black thing still didn't have the ability to communicate, probably not. Hui suddenly felt his heart palpitate. The distorted thing had launched an attack. Maybe it was an attack, but he couldn't feel it at all. Hui instinctively dodged, but Yun Nuoshing was one step faster and pulled him back. The place where they were standing just now suddenly exploded with a ball of brilliant and dazzling energy firework. The dazzling white light made Hui feel a little numb on his scalp. The dazzling white light with a powerful energy impact reverberated in this star field. It was as if a star had just exploded and turned into dust in the star field. When Yun Nuoxing pulled Hui back, she gently pressed her palm against the starry sky and grabbed downwards. A black cloud-like giant energy hand that was millions of feet in size appeared with the starry sky as its raw material. It distorted the starry sky and dispersed the shock wave that came after it. It met the dark, twisted jungle head-on. The frequency of the strange, buzzing sound in his mind became a little faster, and a sharp sound rang out. With the black forest as the center, a deep black energy halo suddenly exploded at lightning speed, blasting the layers of forest outside into powder. In the next blink of an eye, it met with the giant hand of stars again. The collision of the two huge energies tore a huge hole in the starry sky horizontally, leading to the void. The giant starry hand was shattered into several pieces, but it did not stop and continued to rush towards the black jungle. Yun Nuoxing threw Hui behind him, and his hands danced as fast as lightning, carving golden runes in the starry sky one after another. They were smashed into pieces by his palm, and turned into countless tiny fragments. Those fragments rushed to the surroundings of the dark forest like lightning, and wrapped around it like a group of little fairies. After a moment, they all turned into pieces of arrays that were only the size of a thumb, and the center of the arrays were all facing the black sarcoma that was not blown up by his own energy. Stars of the myriad realms, heavenly light of the great Tao, Yun Nuoxing elegantly turned around. The light in her hand surged and gradually condensed into the divine power scepter. She pointed it at the place surrounded by countless tiny golden arrays. Void, assemble! Like an order from the heavens, the space suddenly turned into the deepest darkness. The space was broken through, and the deep void surged into the real world. With the power of thousands of worlds and the light of countless stars, the hole in the space was dyed in a myriad of colors. It was as if an unusually colorful void was collapsing. We looked at the symbolic colorful void, and could not help but swallow. That sarcoma contained the power of thousands of worlds. The degree of entanglement of the rules could be said to be terrifying. To deal with it, one had to use the power of the same level. That is, the power of the same level of the world, fusing the power of thousands of worlds. Buzz buzz. The sound in his mind was exaggerated once again. The sudden sense of crisis made Hui tremble. He did not care that Yun Nuoxing, who was in the middle of attacking, had not yet finished her move. She hurriedly dragged him and fled. The next second, a huge explosion like a huge glass being smashed by a battering ram came from in front of them. The space they were in just now was crushed together with the void. That guy still has the strength to beat me up while dealing with your attack? Hui was a little dumbfounded. Break. As Yun Nuoxing was being dragged away, he did not forget to let the staff fall. Immediately, a vast amount of energy surged in the space surrounded by countless golden formations. The space there began to tremble unstably, bringing with it the energy of thousands of worlds as it charged towards the center. In that instant, the energy fireworks ignited, causing people to mistakenly think that a dazzling star had suddenly been born in this region of stars. Where did you get so much power of the world? We looked at the place where the energy fireworks bloomed and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He could not help but ask. There are many destroyed worlds in the depths of this void. I borrowed their remnant sounds before they could dissipate. Yun Nuoxing said. The strength of the power of the world depended on the strength of the world itself. There were many ways to judge, but now was not the time to talk about this. The other party used the abyssal death mist to condense the power of countless worlds as a defense. It could only be broken by energy of the same quality. He had no choice but to borrow the remnant sounds of destruction. In fact, it was considered an attack and defense on the order level. If it was an ordinary defense, he could break it with a casual slap. There was no need to waste so much effort. The heavenly god of Origin's attack and defense on the order level were like child's play. In the past, when he used this level of power, he had to hold it in for a few minutes as if he was constipated. Now, he could do it with a wave of his hand. Hui pulled Yun Nuoxing back a great distance in one breath until he saw that his entire vision was about to turn dark. They were about to fall into the black hole of the abyssal death mist. They looked at the enemy in the distance who could no longer be seen. In the middle of the overwhelming torrent of world power, fireworks were set off, shining with energy that could be seen in the entire star field at the same time. However, the two of them did not relax, because if nothing unexpected happened, this level of attack would, at best, be cancelled out. In the end, when the enemy emerged from the eggshell, they would still have to rush up and fight. Roar! A real roar that made the laws and order tremble shook the entire star field. A portion of the stars in the depths of the star field were extinguished, and the space was surging like a tsunami. The energy fireworks in that area were torn in half by a huge force. With Yun Nuoxing and the others' eyesight, they could clearly see that there was a giant tens of thousands of feet tall crawling out of the sea of stars. It stood in the star field, and the black energy that made one's heart palpitate circulated all over its body. Oh, it's over. Hui sucked in a breath of cold air, and his face paled a little. The guy who stands at the peak of the 9 heavens of Origin. I can feel the power of 4 primordial realms from its body. It's a monster, right? Yun Nuoxing calmly slapped the Netherruin's sword into the scepter. Light surged in his hand, and a divine sword emerged from the ball of light. He held it tightly in his hand. Whether it's a monster or not, it's not a big deal. A guy who stands at the peak of the Origin, Yun Nuoxing murmured, and then smiled bitterly. It's either he beats us to death or we kill him. Choose one? Can I choose to escape? Hui raised his hands, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, he couldn't. Chapter 1190. In the depths of the starry sky, countless stars had lost their light. Their light and their bodies had been stripped of their rules by some unimaginably powerful force. The order of the surrounding space had also become bizarre and collapsed. In a dead and dark place, there was a sudden reversal of an energy nova. Countless scattered energies gathered in that dark space again, and finally condensed into a huge star, emitting a dazzling blue light. Its size became smaller and smaller in a few minutes, and then completely solidified at the same size. It lasted for a while, and with a bang, it suddenly disappeared into nothingness like a bubble under the sun. Similar things were happening in many places, and this was only one of the most obvious places. The entire star field was flickering as if it had gone crazy. Stars of all sizes suddenly appeared and were annihilated in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the star field itself was shaking. Fong, this starry sky can't hold on for much longer. We have to think of something. Hui took a step forward and stood in front of Yun Nuoxing and said softly, "Well said. But other than fighting, what else can we do?" Yun Nuoxing shrugged. "That big guy has woken up. I don't know how many years he has been in a dream. He was turned into a ghost by the abyssal death mist. I don't know if he will be scared to death when he looks at himself in the mirror." Yun Nuoxing said with a faint smile. "But whether he is alive or dead, he is already standing on the other side of the order. And he is still shaking this starry sky. There is no need to worry about anything. Destroy him." Hui heard that, but he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "He is the supreme of Sua. If possible, I want to wake him up, even if it is just for a short while. I want to know what happened in the Sua continent back then, and about the underworld." Yun Nuoxing tilted his head and looked at him, and whispered, "Don't you just want to see if you can still be saved? There is no need to talk about other things." Hui laughed awkwardly. "The world that you have treated so gently, do you know that it will one day turn around and eat you away?" Yun Nuoxing spoke very softly, so Hui didn't hear him clearly. He looked at him in confusion. Feng, what did you just say? I say. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. If you want to save him, you'll have to put in a lot of effort. That's a peak-level heavenly origin god we're talking about. If you want me to kill him, I have a million ways to do it. If you want me to save him, then you might as well kill me. There was no way he would say those exact words out loud. He had known him for more than a day or two, and he was a good guy from the inside out. If he could save someone, he would not give up. He had never considered paying a price for it. Logically speaking, the guardians of the gods should be decisive in killing people. Well, there was no rule saying that a guardian could not be a good guy. Who knew, maybe the guardian had to be a good guy. Could it be that even the god realm couldn't bear to watch any longer, so they created an observer? Hui shrunk his neck. Just as he was about to say something, Yun Nuoshing said, well, let's wait and see first. Maybe it's just as you said, there's still hope. Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a change in the starry sky. The starry sky that looked like it would explode at any moment suddenly stabilized. At this moment, countless suns appeared in the starry sky, and the heat from the suns seemed to set the entire starry sky ablaze. The giant stood in the middle of the starry sky and maintained his posture of roaring at the sky. In the next moment, he strangely stopped. It was as if time had stopped. Yun Nuoshing and Hui, who were on high alert, were also stunned. They could feel the subtle change in the atmosphere. The giant's aura was still hovering in the starry sky, and they thought that they would be immediately locked onto by his aura. However, at this moment, they felt that the giant's aura seemed to have directed all of his hostility and malice outside. Bang! The sound of the starry sky exploding suddenly entered their ears. Hui watched as the giant suddenly rushed towards them. He felt his scalp go numb. He quickly waved his hand and the divine staff appeared. Just as he was about to grab it with both hands and do something, he paused. He saw the giant sweep past them and rush towards the abyss black hole. Yun Nuoshing didn't do anything from the beginning to the end. He could feel that the giant's consciousness wasn't directed at them. However, when he saw the giant rushing towards the abyss black hole, he couldn't help but be stunned. Bang! Before the two of them could do anything, they heard an even more violent collision sound coming from in front of them. Judging from the sound, the giant should have crashed into something. They turned around and saw a layer of transparent black barrier appearing in front of them. Judging from the way the giant flew away from them, he might have crashed into the barrier and bounced off. Yun Nuoshing and Hui were dumbfounded. What was going on? Roar! Roar! The most powerful being of Sua let out an angry roar. He seemed to know that he couldn't do anything to the barrier in a short period of time. With a bang, he shattered the starry sky with a punch and entered the void. The void crack was so big that it could fit an entire planet. It wouldn't close up in a short period of time. The giant came and went like the wind. Yun Nuoshing and Hui were dumbfounded. They couldn't figure out what he was doing for a long time. Is that a barrier of order? I smell a very complicated energy aura. It might take some time to break through it. Hui looked at the black barrier that was still rippling after being hit by the most powerful being's head and said, "That's right. With our strength, it might take an incense stick's worth of time to break it open." Yun Nuoshing's expression changed as he spoke. He looked at the void crack and said, "Oh no, that big guy ran outside." "Where is outside?" Hui was still thinking and couldn't catch up with Yun Nuoshing's change of topic. After a while, his expression changed drastically and he said, "It's the war zone outside." Yun Nuoshing waved his hand vigorously and dragged him toward the void crack. "Let's go and take a look. Damn it, we've made a big mess this time." Judging from the actions of the most powerful being of Sua and the scene of his death, I'm afraid he's rushing to find trouble with the Abyss Death Mist. He might even directly hit the place where the people of the underworld are. Then why did he beat me up just now? Hui was shocked and turned pale. He must have slept too much. I don't know how many years it has been. Hui was speechless. Roar, roar. A furious roar came from the depths of the void, and a powerful pressure that was almost condensed into a substance, with an almost infinite power of rules, crushed the void like thin ice. This degree of oppression and the indiscriminate impact of rules even moved Yun Nuoxing and Hui. The speed of passing through the void increased a little. Hui broke free from Yun Nuoxing's claws and quickly sped up. That's a war zone outside. Well, I can feel the aura of the birth and annihilation of countless energy tides. If I fall from here to the real world, there's a 99% chance that we'll crash into the place where the battle is taking place. Maybe it's a world or a shallow layer of the void, Yun Nuoxing said without turning his head. His face was expressionless, but the faint light flowing out of his black pupils showed that he was in a bad mood. He said, "It's hard to sense the situation outside when we're in the bottom layer of the void." He was stunned for a moment, and his expression became a little bad. He said, "We've already reached the middle plane. The intensity of the surrounding energy has increased a lot. The frequency of energy annihilation and the frequency of energy collision are very high. That big guy will definitely be a huge problem when he rushes out." His words seemed to be an omen. As soon as he said that, an even more violent roar exploded from the depths of the void. Then, an indescribably powerful energy burst out from the depths of the void, shattering the void. If the void could be divided into 9 layers, then this space would only be half a layer thick. It would not be far from the state of nothingness. The collapsed void had already revealed the blurry space of the real world and the thin layer of void. With a quick glance, what they saw was the burning void. Endless black energy fog filled the entire void. That disgusting and repulsive aura was something that could make people vomit. Even if they used their toes to think, they would know what it was. And further away in the real world, there were many, perhaps many life forms. Whether they were humanoid or not, they were all life forms under the control of order. Their opponents were of course the abyssal death mist and its spawns. They were not strong enough to be called an army. They were just small groups. To the two of them, but to the life forms of order outside, this was already an army of darkness. Their power was like mayflies trying to shake a tree. They could not even withstand a single blow. The two of them could not see more clearly. In the end, they only had time to see countless lives vanishing into nothingness. The death of the God-tier champions was like a joke. They were easily harvested. This was the phenomenon of a corner of the void. It was also the current state of the entire void. Deep in the void burst like bubbles that were popped. It shook and shattered the last thin layer of the void together with the real world. The remaining energy waves disintegrated the defense of the void inch by inch. The void gradually appeared. And across the void, Yun Nuoxing and the others could see a blazing flame coming out of a part of the void. That place that had been reduced to nothingness emitted a light. It was so weak that it could be ignored. But it stubbornly came to Yun Nuoxing and the others. They saw that it was probably a passage from the void to the real world. It happened to open up next to a star. It projected its blazing light into the void. It was powerless to struggle as it was weakened and devoured by the chaos and chaos in this place. That Supreme One still rushed out. Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes as he looked at that ray of sunlight. He could feel the endless power of destruction from the real world. There was also the presence of the law of destruction. He took the lead and rushed out. "Let's go. Let's go. Now that things have come to this, we can either fight or..." Hui reacted and quickly followed. Or destroy. Strangle all life until there is nothing left. Destroy all the death fog in the abyss. No one knows that we have been here. Huey's face was full of horror. "Wait. I think we need to discuss." "All right, I'm just excited. Let's go." They were just scouts who went to the lower plains to inspect the border. This was their identity for this trip. not to be the vanguard of the war. The enemy's strength was far beyond their imagination. The realm of the gods needed to urgently prepare for war. A war was inevitable, but not now. However, the appearance of that Supreme One, Suya, was an unexpected product. It was to the extent that they needed to urgently clean up the mess. If they triggered something that should not have happened in advance, the realm of the gods would be finished. If the first world was finished, then the Deyuan realm would be finished as well. Yun Nuoshing suddenly realized that he should be in a dream at this moment. He shook his head hard. It did not matter if it was a dream or not. Even if it was a dream, he should just go with the flow first. The two of them rushed out of the void. The violent changes in the rules made them immediately understand that this was a space of order, a stable space built by powerful energy. It was very large, and it might not be a problem to accommodate hundreds of worlds. The surging energy in this space was also abnormally large. Perhaps it was the center of the middle plane. There was energy of heavenly god tier, and almost heavenly god tier surging and spreading throughout the entire space. Moreover, it was the power of order, not the death fog of the abyss. Its energy was also here, just like it would definitely be in a place with order. It was also entrenched here, and it was the number of an entire army. The army of darkness was a complete army of darkness, the type whose rules were self-stabilizing. They appeared here in advance, unlike what Yun Nuoshing knew, which only appeared when the death fog of the abyss disappeared. They were originally one with the death fog of the abyss, so how could they appear in batches? Yun Nuoshing saw the end of this space at a glance, and instantly understood what was happening in this space. The things that happened in this space were in line with his understanding of the death fog of the abyss. How should he put it? It was unexpectedly a little more normal. Time did not allow them to observe this space for too long. In just a matter of a few seconds, they felt the starry sky of order suddenly shake. Accompanying this shaking was a furious roar that shook the universe from the depths of the starry sky. A red energy beam mixed with viscous black energy suddenly cut through the starry sky, leaving a dazzling scar in the starry sky. The starry sky that was cut by the light beam was distorted, as if it was collapsing. The countless stars that were originally blooming on the battlefield disappeared along with the collapse of the starry sky. Half of the starry sky dimmed, and the whole scar was like a sea that was being split open, collapsing into the depths of the void. The surrounding starry sky was attracted and pulled closer to this scar. In just a few blinks of an eye, a huge leak space was formed, and the surrounding starry sky was distorted beyond recognition. And as the starry sky cracked open, an even more insane destructive energy gushed out from the void. That supreme being Sua could not wait to make his move. He originally thought that his brain was scorched by the death fog of the abyss and would release an indiscriminate energy attack, but Yun Nuoshing clearly saw that the energy he released was all rushing towards the death fog of the abyss and the dark army. The life forms of order that were fighting here were not affected at all. The energy that was so terrifying that Yun Nuoshing could not help but whistle alarmed everyone in this special space. When the life forms of order saw the violent energy that was enough to overturn order, their faces were as pale as paper. They thought that a powerful spawn of the death fog of the abyss had come to support them, and the flames of hope in their hearts were suddenly extinguished. But when they focused their eyes, they saw that the dark army and the death fog of the abyss were being annihilated by the violent energy, and their formation was disrupted like a boat in the wind. They were stunned again. The aura of the death fog of the abyss lingered around the body of the colossal giant, and everyone immediately judged that it was the reinforcements of the death fog of the abyss, but now it seemed that it was not so. It was their reinforcements? Roar! Roar! The dark army all over the world stopped their actions and roared angrily at the giant that suddenly appeared. The death fog of the abyss that filled the sky suddenly protruded from a few places, and under the gaze of countless people, it turned into ferocious black giant faces. Those ferocious faces grew out of thin air from the sky, and their scarlet eyes surged with a light that could take away one's mind. The leader of the allied forces of the 10,000 Realms, Sector Lord Lu Tianguang, smashed a giant of the death fog of the abyss into smoke with a strike of his staff. His face that was dyed red by the blood of someone or those twisted monsters was illuminated by the light of the space crack. He looked at the giant that suddenly appeared in the depths of the sky and was also stunned for a moment. He was the most powerful person in this world, and this space was a special world that he opened. Perhaps he could be called the most powerful person in the Middle Realm, but even he could not detect the aura of the giant, and subconsciously thought that it was a guest from the upper realm. He wanted to shout some words of encouragement, but when he sensed the aura of the giant and saw his actions, he was also stunned and forgot what to do for a moment. This battle had been going on for a very, very long time. It had already begun when they used a little trick to lead a small part of the death fog of the Middle Realm here. The Heaven's Light Realm was their headquarters, and there were countless hidden hands here. Their original plan was to block the death fog of the abyss at the entrance of the Heaven's Light Realm and continuously strangle it, hoping to slowly kill it off. However, the death fog of the abyss kept using small cannon fodder to weaken their strength and attack the barrier of the Heaven's Light Realm, forcibly opening that small gap that was deliberately left open, and left their destructive aura of rules on the battlefield. That power kept eroding the barrier, gradually widening the gap, and the number of enemies they faced also increased. Unknowingly, they had already fallen to such a state. If the battle continued, the Heaven's Light Realm would be completely destroyed, and more death fog of the abyss would surge in. The familiar faces would disappear one by one, and in the end he would also fall, and no one would be spared. Hey, buddy, come back to your senses. You can't be distracted on the battlefield. His shoulder was patted hard, and LV Tianguang only felt that his shoulder was about to be dislocated. He grimaced with all his might, and when he turned around, he saw a sunny face that he had a slight impression of. However, he couldn't recall it for a while. The only thing he knew now was that the person in front of him was very strong, so strong that it was a little ridiculous. Hui revealed a bright smile at him, and sized up his face. Suddenly, he let out a long "oh" and said, "It's you. Then, this is the Heaven's Light Realm." LV Tianguang was stunned again. You know me? Know you? No, I only heard that there is a very special place in the Middle Realm, and I have been here before, although it was just a quick glance. Hui smiled and shook his head. Then, he said, this is not the time to chat. You guys reorganize the Alliance army, boom. Before he could finish his sentence, an energy tempest that was several tens of times stronger than the spatial crack earlier swept through half of the heavenly light world. Countless people were astonished and hurriedly dodged. The terrifying energy shock wave swept out and sent the darkness army along with the starry sky into void space, disappearing without a trace. An extremely violent energy storm swept across the heavenly light world, completely clearing out an area. When the energy ripples dissipated, many people cast their terrified gazes over. Then, they saw a figure with an aura that could sweep through all the regions in the world, rushing toward the place where the abyss death fog gathered. With a sweep, he cleared out an area. When they took a closer look, that person's beautiful face revealed a maniacal smile, causing their scalps to tingle. This face, coupled with this maniacal expression, really gave off a different feeling. Hui scratched the back of his head and shrugged his shoulders at LV Tianguang, who was in a daze. Hurry up and reorganize the troop. We are here to help. Phone, wait for me. As he said that, Hui shouted and rushed toward the place where the storm had ended. Suddenly, another energy shock wave that was not weaker than the previous energy nova explosion swept across the star sector. LV Tianguang was in a daze. Throughout his life, who knew how many years he had lived, he had never encountered such a strange thing. Everyone, reorganize the troops. Our reinforcements are here. He did not hesitate and shouted loudly. His voice, which contained the power of the rules, boomed in the minds of the Alliance army, raising the morale of many people. Follow me and kill. In the 51st era of the Great Yuan realm, near the middle of this era, the Middle Realm started a counterattack due to the arrival of two unexpected guests. This was also the beginning of the Great Yuan realm's order life forms fighting against the Abyss Death Fog together. Chapter 1191. At the mention of war, perhaps one would subconsciously feel that the entire space was filled with countless lives fighting to the death. Both sides were evenly matched, at least in terms of numbers. What was that saying again? Fighting with numbers also had its advantages, right? However, if there were two inhuman fellows in this sea of people, then the situation was not quite right. At least, LV Tianguang already felt that something was very wrong. Ever since the giant and the other two barged in, there was no room for them to make a move in this battle. The abyssal death fog that covered the entire heaven-light world, as well as countless spawns, were rapidly retreating under the attacks of the three fellows. As expected, when the quality of the abyssal death fog was inferior to a certain extent, quantity could not make up for it. The countless derivatives of the abyssal death fog joined together and gathered together. Originally, the Darkness Army gathered together to maintain the stability of the abyssal death fog. Now, they were still in groups and were easily destroyed by Yun Nuoxing and the other two. The battle between the people of the heaven-light world and the abyssal death fog had almost completely stopped. Occasionally, they would attack and kill one or two small fries that the three of them could not be bothered with. The main characters of the battlefield had unknowingly become the three fellows who had appeared out of nowhere. The three fellows who would be easily drowned by the abyssal death fog and the Darkness Army. No, the one who would be drowned was the abyssal death fog. Their energy covered the entire heaven-light world. They seemed to be alone, but they were equivalent to an entire army. The area of annihilation caused by the three of them covered every corner of the heaven-light world. As long as one was on the battlefield, one would be able to sense the three of them. The abominable aura of the abyssal death fog had already been completely covered. Even if they were close, it was difficult to sense them. This was the case for the people beside them. Everyone's aura had become weak. Only the auras of the three of them were left in this starry sky. If one did not use their eyes to look, they would feel that they had become a lone soldier who was being watched by a few armies. Boom! Boom! Once again, an energy that could shake the laws and order swept across the sky. The black energy beam swept across the starry sky with an energy that could shatter all things, chiseling a large hole in the void. With just a sweep, the Dark Army 100 million miles away was reduced to ashes. Thousands of energy formations that spanned tens of thousands of miles, or even millions of miles, revolved around Yun Nuoxing like stars surrounding the moon. His powerful soul, spirit, and mind supported these tens of thousands of formations, sending boundless energy to every corner of the heaven's light world. His eyes were as bright as stars, and he raised his hands as if he was waving something. His hands crossed and then retracted, and the tens of thousands of formations changed directions. Starlight and fluorescent light flashed, indicating that they were always in a state of being filled with energy. The pitch-black, rainbow-colored energy that represented the elements suddenly swept out from the countless formations. The massive energy torrent drowned out the starry sky. Far away, LV Tianguang even felt that it was an energy curtain and not some energy torrent, but a curtain that could cover the starry sky. It pushed forward into the depths of the starry sky, and energy shockwaves constantly spread out from its center. Those were only the weak aftershocks of the massive energy release, but they were already enough to reduce half of the Dark Army into black smoke. That massive energy torrent kept shrinking as it moved forward, from the size of a galaxy to the size of a few suns, and finally to the size of a planet. As its size shrank, its energy was crazily compressed, and its power multiplied. In the end, it collided with the abyss death mist manifestation that was the size of a sun. The energy torrent that had condensed into a substance was like a heavenly sword that burned with colorful flames, piercing through its head. Then, it suddenly moved downwards, cleaving it into two. Ta! Yun Nuashing stretched out his left hand and snapped his fingers. The energy torrent that had condensed into a crystal suddenly emitted an even brighter light. The next second, a new energy star that was large enough to scare a heavenly god to death erupted from the center of the energy torrent that spread out hundreds of billions of light years. It was as if what he had shot out was not an energy torrent but a cone-shaped energy crystal. At this moment, the energy crystal exploded, and the dazzling energy light illuminated the entire heaven's light world, making it seem as if it had fallen into a world of light. 80% of the people present were blinded, and the people without eyes had their sensory organs almost completely destroyed. They all stared at the energy torrent with their eyes wide open. Everything happened too quickly. On the other side of the battlefield, Hui was also illuminated by the light. He hurriedly shrank his body behind the shield that was about the size of a person. He howled and complained to Yun Nuashing, "Feng, can't you tell our allies if you magnify?" "How am I magnifying?" Yun Nuashing rolled his eyes. In the time it took for him to do so, he flipped his hand and expanded the area of influence of the energy shock by a few hundred times. Wherever the shock wave passed, not even ghosts or gods were left behind. Hui Geng squeaked as he was sent flying by the stronger impact. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Every time Yun Nuashing made a move, it would be magnified for him. It was only when the shock wave started to weaken and the light dimmed that someone dared to open their eyes to take a look. They stared blankly at the terrifying scene in front of them. They were shocked by the power of the outsider. The strange monsters that filled the battlefield and the heavenly light world had a huge hole blasted open at this moment. It was an empty hole. The manifestations that were only affected by the weak energy also collapsed mysteriously. Every moment, there were manifestations that turned into black smoke and dissipated. It was as if there was an order for them to die. A roar came from the depths of the starry sky. Yun Nuashing and Hui both turned their gazes. Suya, the Supreme Being, was continuously venting his anger on the other side of the heavenly light world. His monstrous anger and resentment that had settled down for countless years were all released at this moment. When that power engulfed the abyss death fog, it was also continuously burning his own body. Hui wiped his sweat. "This fellow, does he want to die here if he continues to fight like this?" Dong. Mixed in with his ferocious roar was a leisurely and mournful bell sound. The vast bell sound reverberated and shattered the starry sky, turning the dark army that was charging over from all directions into powder. His mountain-like body was as small as an ant in front of the planet-sized abyss death fog manifestation. However, that heavenly god tier manifestation was not his mat. After several head-on collisions, the planet-sized body rapidly shrank. When it had almost lost half of its power, the Supreme Being stretched out his mountain-like palm and tore it apart. The black fog that exploded spread out in all directions like a black river of stars. At the very beginning, the extraordinary destructive power they displayed was only because they were up against the cannon fodder of the Darkness Army, the manifestations that were below the heavenly god tier. However, after truly encountering the manifestations of the heavenly god tier, their attacks had clearly slowed down. They were no longer using the kind of chaotic energy attacks and fighting style. Yun Nuashing had used energy compression, Hui had pulled out the Guardian's shield and greatsword, and Sua's Most High had also used the brain that had been half-burnt to ashes to seriously fight. It was true that they were heavenly gods of origin, so it was easy for them to crush a heavenly god tier being to death. However, to completely eliminate it, completely annihilate it, make it die completely, or make it fall into the cycle of reincarnation or shatter its soul into 8 realms, all of these required even more powerful method. They needed to cut off its heavenly god-tier manifestation of abyss death fog before they could give it a complete death. However, this was actually not so easy to see on a higher level. This was because the only thing that LV Tianguang and the others could see was that Yun Nuoxing and the other two had wiped out dozens of heavenly god-tier manifestations of abyss death fog with a wave of their hand. As for themselves, when they were fighting, they had gathered the power of countless people and were still unable to completely destroy one of them after half a day. No matter how many times they were killed, they would stand up again like ghosts. Killing and completely destroying a heavenly god-tier being were two completely different concepts. The giant manifestation that Yun Nuoxing and the others saw when they first arrived at the void was also only at the heavenly god-tier. The reason why they did not make a move was because destroying a heavenly god-tier being would cause too much of a commotion, so much so that it would be difficult to conceal it. Now that they had made such a commotion, there was no other way. After all, the heaven's light world had been sealed off. No matter how much trouble they caused, they would not be noticed by the people outside. That supreme being Suya raised his hand and threw out dozens of energy crystals that were produced in the Suya continent. They were arranged in a specific position in a star sector. The dozens of energy crystals simultaneously exploded with a dazzling light. An enormous divine aura surged out from that star sector. That divine aura seemed to be suppressing and restraining the abyss death fog. The black aura on the manifestation of the abyss death fog in that domain was constantly being stripped away, and its aura was constantly being weakened. That's that divine aura that was left behind in Suya? Hui Yi's shield sent the heavenly god-tier manifestation that had shrunk to the size of an ordinary person flying. He turned his head in astonishment. Feng, is that the divine aura that you felt left behind in Suya? It's of the same origin. Yun Nuoxing nodded. That divine aura that was left behind in the Suya continent was also related to the barrier that enveloped the Suya continent. That divine aura was unable to completely eliminate the abyss death fog and its manifestations. It suppressed them at the bottom of the world, and at the same time, sealed off the Suya continent. It was within the duo's expectations. That powerful divine aura could only be left behind by that supreme being. It was completely different from his current aura. This was not an aura that could be left behind by the same person. That supreme being had long since passed away. What was trapped in that body was only an eternally inextinguishable hatred and resentment. Just that hatred and resentment alone was enough to support him to continue fighting for such a long time. Cracks appeared in the starry sky once again. The heavenly light world had already been destroyed a few times, but they all noticed that it didn't affect those planets. It probably didn't affect. Alright, only those who were deaf and blind would not be able to detect the energy impact from the Yun Nua planet that split the sky and earth. Someone beside LV Tianguang walked up. Sector Lord. The warriors of the heavenly light world have already stopped. Half an hour ago, they couldn't even pick up any scraps and could only turn to defense. They really can't get close. If they force themselves to get close, they might be accidentally injured. I know. Let's not talk about you guys. It is also very dangerous for me to get close. LV Tianguang shook his head and turned to look at the peaceful heavenly light world. At least 1/3 of the heavenly light world was peaceful. The deep abyss death fog had been completely destroyed by the world-splitting energy attack just now. The remaining fog was chased away by the 3 of them and continuously destroyed. Since we can't attack, we can only defend. At least, the results so far are still considered good. However, we can't let down our guard. The abyss death fog can easily take advantage of our weakness, just like the day when the entrance to the heavenly light world was forcefully expanded. After saying that, he raised his head and looked at the vast starry sky in the distance. He did not speak for a long time inside, it is also time. We can't defend the heavenly light world by ourselves. We can't defend the middle planes by ourselves. The abyss death fog is advancing too quickly. All the middle planes are now in a bitter battle. I'm afraid that no one will dare to extend a hand to help others. Otherwise, they will be dragged into the abyss, that person said. Therefore, it is not just the middle planes. LV Tianguang twirled the ring in his hand. The lower planes are almost completely destroyed. Those controllers in high positions should have noticed by now. After saying that, he laughed bitterly and glanced at Yun Nuoxing and Hui, who were still fighting in the distance. However, we don't need to remind them. There are already people coming from the upper planes. Moreover, I'm afraid that they are from there. There. Are you referring to the first major world? Other than there, where else can there be such a strong person? LV Tianguang was stunned for a moment as he said that. However, it could also be people from the other two realms. The three major worlds that are located at the center of the eight elements realm all have such strong people. It would be best if they noticed. With the Abyss Death Fog's methods, it will crush the middle planes sooner or later and flatten the upper planes. Hui took a deep breath and abandoned the shield in his hand. He grabbed the silver greatsword that was more than 10 meters long with both hands and pulled it up. He swung the greatsword with both hands and swung it around like a windmill. One swing of the greatsword sent a heavenly god-tier manifestation flying. He looked at the manifestation that had not completely collapsed, and a faint sense of astonishment rose in his heart. Feng, the abyss death fog we've encountered so far seems to have become much stronger. Can't we use power that surpasses the limit? Hui took the time to ask at the top of his voice. The countless spell formations behind Yun Nuoxing shone with divine radiance. Every beam of light that swept past would cause the starry sky to darken and destroy countless abyss death fog manifestations. He glanced at the big guy who was fighting happily in the distance and shook his head. This sealed space only allows one of us to use our full strength. This crude seal cannot withstand the torment of two of us, much less three heavenly gods of origin. So we're giving that big guy some space? Hui muttered somewhat unhappily. When he turned his head, he saw that supreme being of Esue roar that shook swathes of monsters to death. A beam of divine radiance shot from one end of the starry sky to the other like a long river of starlight. The vast energy waves caused the starry sky to tremble and collapse. Hui could not help but shrink his neck back when he saw this. Yun Nuoxing yawned lazily, and then suddenly came back to his senses. Now was not the time to yawn. It seemed that Feng Ling's consciousness, which had been suppressed with great difficulty, was about to rise from the ashes again. Actually, there was no such thing. They had been fighting for a while now, and he was currently acting as Feng Ling's consciousness. That guy was also as lazy as hell, so it was already unprecedented for him to be able to fight like this. He could not ask for more when he thought of this. He felt a sense of laziness coming from the depths of his body, causing his fighting spirit to somewhat collapse. Yawn. Isn't it good to slack off? Hui was dumbfounded. It's over. The heat has burned out in 3 minutes. Anyway, that big guy. He can use the power of the heavenly god of origin. He can take care of it alone. We're just here to show off. As he spoke, Yun Nuoxing felt that his sleepiness had become a lot stronger, and he had already suppressed his fighting spirit. Hey! Hui looked at his lazy appearance and was a little shocked. The silver greatsword in his hand turned into a huge shield, and he quickly rushed to Feng Ling's side. The shadow of the huge shield shielded Hui behind him, and he used the shield to send a charging monster flying backward. You should have picked a better time. How do you want me to take care of you? Yun Nuoxing suddenly came to his senses and shook his head. Let the big guy take care of it himself. I'm waiting for that thing. Guess what's inside? The place where he pointed was in the depths of the abyssal death mist. There was a black sun. It used to be a pure star, but it was tainted by the abyssal death mist. The Dark Army intentionally or unintentionally approached that place, as if they were guarding it. Yun Nuoshing did not think that these creatures with almost no intelligence would have any strategy to speak of, but he just felt that something was not right there. It could only be a deliberate arrangement by someone. He inadvertently took a few glances and saw a lot of power of the abyssal death mist pouring into that place. We had already noticed that thing, but he only thought of it as an unlucky star that was tainted by the abyssal death mist. He did not expect Yun Nuoshing to pay attention to it, and he could not help but pay attention to it. It was a star that had turned black. It floated quietly in the star region, and its light was restrained. It was motionless, as if it was still in a deep sleep. It was not the nest of the Dark Army. They were just guards, and the thing that occupied it was the endless abyssal death mist. I tried to invade that place, but I was blocked by an even crazier and more powerful force. It's a little difficult to break through without exceeding the limit, Yun Nuoshing said seriously. The main thing is that I'm a little lazy. We looked like he was about to burst into tears. Had his 3 minutes already been burned out even earlier? That is a very important energy node in the heavenly light world. It is one of the nodes that maintains the stability of the heavenly light world. LV Tianguang walked over from the side and explained to Yun Nuoshing and Hui. When the abyssal death mist accidentally broke into this space, the first thing it occupied was that energy node. Although I quickly made adjustments and abandoned that node to maintain the integrity of the heavenly light world, part of the space controlled by that node was still destroyed. Why did you come over? Weren't you so afraid that you did not dare to come over? We looked at him in surprise. LV Tianguang's forehead was covered in sweat. Well, we saw that you stopped, so we carefully came over. Yun Nuoshing turned his head lazily. Most of the battles in the heavenly light world had been taken over by Suya, and the two of them were the only ones left. However, at this moment, he encountered a small problem, and the battle stopped. The warriors of the heavenly light world, who had rested for a long time, charged forward once again. They could be considered the strongest forces in the middle plane. When they worked together, they could suppress the abyssal death mist. Previously, they were just too tired from fighting for too long, but overall, they still managed to hold the front line. We tried to snatch that node back. After all, that is a node in the heavenly light world. The replacement that we found at the last minute is not that perfect. We paid a price, and the losses did not make up for it. LV Tianguang shrugged his shoulders. Energy node. Yun Nuoshing's brain, which had been frozen for a long time, finally regained its senses. However, his attention was obviously still in front of him. Furthermore, his lifeless expression shocked everyone around him. Those who did not know better would think that he had been corroded by the abyssal death mist. Ah Yan, if it's the energy node, I know what they want to do. Yun Nuoshing lazily yawned. They intend to destroy the heavenly light world. LV Tianguang's expression froze. You mean Yun Nuoshing's head swayed left and right. After about 10 minutes, he lazily said, causing everyone to be anxious. Energy node. The heavenly light world's energy node is connected to the energy network of the entire world. The most important thing about the spatial connection method that you used is these nodes yawn. If the enemy is strong enough, they can use these nodes to dismantle your spatial connection bit by bit. LV Tianguang's face turned pale. He did not think of this at all. Outside there is a battle. Yun Nuoshing revealed a silly smile and stretched out his hand to point outside. There are groups of enemies that can fill up half of the dimension, outside? But Hui was anxious. But what? Yun Nuoshing stuck out his tongue and grinned foolishly. The borders of the middle dimension have already fallen. Now, almost half of the dimension's abyssal death mist is surrounding the heavenly light world. Now, doesn't this heavenly light world look like a can? When this can is opened, Hui's face darkened. Your head. When the can is opened, it will be their turn to be surrounded. Chapter 1192. LV Tianguang stood in the middle of this star field, his eyes flashing with faint confusion. He felt that everything was a little unreal. After nearly 10 days of battle, he saw the heavenly light world slowly being occupied by the death fog of the abyss. Their defensive line was stretched infinitely, and they kept retreating. Even when the entire heavenly light world fell into chaos, the situation was still worsening. He originally thought that the heavenly light world that he had painstakingly built had come to an end. He never thought that when he stood here, he would still be able to see the sun that had turned into darkness in the distance. Countless figures shuttled rapidly through the star field of the heavenly light world. A portion of them were consolidating their defensive line and cleaning up the mess behind them. The remaining 90% of the soldiers were still charging at the front, fighting with the utmost being Suyao, who had lost control and whose rationality was unknown. The two sides were actually fighting for themselves. If they leaned closer to the utmost being Suyao, they would easily be injured. This was the news brought back by a few unlucky heavenly god-tier life forms with afro hair. They didn't pay much attention to him just now and accidentally got too close. They were sent flying by the powerful energy overflowing from the heavenly god of origin. Yun Nuoxing and Hui stood beside LV Tianguang. The former was too lazy to move at this time, looking listless. If it wasn't for the fact that this place wasn't very safe, he might have already laid down. No matter how hard we tried to persuade him, he couldn't reignite his enthusiasm. This was the victory of Feng Ling's consciousness. I'm tired. I'll just rest for a little while, just a little while. Nothing will happen with you guys around. Yan, I'll just stay here and maintain the barrier. It'll be fine. Yes, although the barrier is temporary, it definitely won't break. Yun Nuoxing lazily raised her right hand and gave him a thumbs up, smiling foolishly. Hui looked like he was about to break down. You said a little while last time. You slept for 3 billion years. I remember it. LV Tianguang was also about to break down. How could these two heavenly gods from the first major world be so different? After resetting the line of defense, the two groups of people who were advancing deliberately avoided one place, which was right in front of Yun Nuoxing and the others. In front of them was the dark sun. The power of the abyss death fog that was entrenched there was still quite strong. With this point as the center, the battle line that was pulled out might have occupied 1/3 of the heaven light world. The big hole that had been dug out of the heaven light world was right behind this dark star. The two battle lines of the Alliance Army and the Supreme Being, Suya, happened to be sandwiched between the territory that had shrunk by 1/3. However, the shrinking was also reaching its limit. They were facing more and more resistance, and gradually, they couldn't shrink their territory anymore. There were also countless abyssal death fog and manifestations surrounding the heavenly light world. They did not just wait outside. Instead, they circled around the heavenly light world and all of them surged in through that opening. Yun Nua planet and the others had arrived at the right time. It was really just at the right time. Yun Nua planet had just put up the order barrier, and it was just at the right time that almost all of the worlds outside the void had fallen. There was only one lone island left in the void, the heavenly light world. At this moment they were like a lone island on the sea. They were surrounded by iron walls in all directions, and there was only one port that allowed them to enter this castle on the sea. Although the port was being forcefully expanded at every moment, this wasn't the first time Yun Nuoxing had seen so many abyss death fog derivatives, but he didn't expect that there would be so many of them that it made his hair stand on end. Even a heavenly origin god like him couldn't help but extend his right hand in a greeting gesture. His barrier wasn't really invincible. The abyss death fog outside was still accumulating energy, like layers of mountains that kept increasing in weight. He even suspected that all the abyss death fog in the void had gathered here. There would come a time when he couldn't hold on any longer. The breaking of the barrier was another kind of signal. The abyss death fog accumulating outside was enough to fight a peak heavenly origin god head-on. At that time, no matter what he did to salvage the situation, the best result would be to take Hui and leave this place together. If he didn't handle it well, then the two of them would be buried here. Therefore, if he didn't want to be buried alive, he had to settle the matter at hand, and not stay here and shake his head drowsily. But he really couldn't resist the urge to sleep. Damn, isn't Feng Ling's consciousness too strong? What kind of earth-shattering event did he encounter in his previous life that caused him to sleep in this life? Hui saw the sudden change in Yun Nuoshing's sleepy face and was also stunned. Feng! I'm so sleepy. Yun Nuoshing glanced at him, his head drooping as if he was fishing. Yawn, but if I don't settle the matter at hand, I won't be able to sleep, but I'm so sleepy. Hui! He turned his head stiffly and decided to use his not-so-bright brain to settle this matter. He was a peak heavenly origin god after all, so how could he not feel what Yun Nuoshing was feeling right now? The situation outside was very bad, and they didn't have much time left. They could either fight or defend. There were countless people in the heavenly light world, and probably not many of them would be willing to abandon their hometown and run away. Even if they were willing, they didn't know where to hide with so many people. It was possible to hide on the spiritual world and a few small worlds that could be casually carried around, but they couldn't hide so many god-level and heavenly god-level life forms. Their worlds didn't have the ability to hide people in the first place. It was fine to hide some ordinary people, as they could change the rules at the last minute and do something else. However, the god-level life forms whose rules were too strong, the capacity of their worlds wasn't quite enough. If they were overloaded, they would easily collapse, and if they collapsed, the people hidden inside would all fall out. Then, they would all die, Hui sighed bitterly. In the worst-case scenario, he would definitely be able to escape with Yun Nuoshing, but considering that he couldn't just ignore these people and run away, he decided to think of a reliable, feasible, and confident way to safely move the people of the heavenly light world away from here with LV Tianguang. After all, he was the realm master of the heavenly light world, so he should have a way. This was his territory after all. After listening to his words, LV Tianguang pondered for a while and said, "Actually, the heavenly light world can move. Aren't you talking nonsense? Which world's light ball is fixed in the void and doesn't move?" Perhaps it was because of the urgency of the situation, Hui couldn't help but roll his eyes and say impatiently. Hearing this, LV Tianguang laughed bitterly. "I'm not talking about that kind of movement. The heavenly light world was just the most ordinary and inconspicuous world's light ball in the beginning. It was no different from the other worlds. We can't do something as difficult as fusing worlds' light balls, so we used a special method." Hui nodded. Peak divine gods seemed very powerful, but they were actually quite powerful. Their own laws were so powerful that they could rival the primordial realm and most other worlds, but it was still not enough. At least, it was still not enough in the realm of the god. Without surpassing all the restrictions of the world, their own laws had not reached the level of surpassing, so they would never be able to do something as dangerous as fusing worlds' light balls that shook the world's laws. Carelessly operating it could easily cause 2 or even more worlds to melt together in the void and become a thing of the past. LV Tianguang paused for a while. "We found the remains of many worlds that weren't completely born in the void. Their damaged world cores stayed in the void and still retained many of the laws of the source world. Using 20 damaged world cores to create a divine weapon, we relied on it to fuse and connect hundreds of worlds' light balls." Hui suddenly interrupted. "Wait a minute, so this heavenly light world wasn't created by you?" LV Tianguang was stunned and scratched his head. "Of the hundreds of worlds' light balls, 2/3 of them were created by us. Then, we used that divine weapon to fuse them all together and break the barrier between the different worlds. Is there a problem? No, no, I'm just asking out of curiosity. Hui waved his hand. You can continue. LV Tianguang scratched his head. He saw how agitated Hui was and thought that there was something wrong. He nodded and continued. Even if the heavenly light world is half destroyed, it can still be preserved. As long as the divine weapon that carries these hundreds of worlds is not destroyed, we can create an identical heavenly light world. I'm getting off topic. What I mean is, as long as the heavenly light world remains intact, we can store the entire heavenly light world into that divine weapon, including all the lives in the heavenly light world. Wait a minute. We realized something and a serious expression appeared on his face. What if it's not complete? LV Tianguang revealed a bitter smile. Then it can't be taken back. This step is like the action of closing a box. If the box is damaged, the lid naturally can't be closed. Sigh, after all this talk, we still have to take down that place. Hui snapped his fingers and pointed out the main point. In the end, they still had to fight against that dark star, as well as the countless abyssal death fog and manifestations that were circling there. That star is a very important energy node in the heavenly light world. It controls 1/3 of the heavenly light world, and can ensure that this 1/3 is intact and not damaged. Hui was suddenly stunned again, his face filled with grief. Don't tell me you want me to purify it? LV Tianguang laughed bitterly. Theoretically, that's right. Hui tilted his head and almost fell onto Yun Nuoxing's body. His face was filled with pain. It was not a problem for him to fight and kill. After all, as a guardian, if he did not fight, then he would fight. If he fought, then he would fight. If Yun Nuoxing said that he was a good person, he would admit it. Anyway, he just couldn't stand to see people being kidnapped by the death fog. His kindness overflowed and he wanted to save them. However, what kind of strange operation was it to purify an entire star that was contaminated by the abyss death fog? He had been a guardian his whole life, but he had never encountered such a complicated matter. This kind of high-end operation was usually left to his sincere good friends. He suddenly turned his head. While they were talking, Yun Nuoxing had already closed her eyes and was about to fall asleep. Suddenly, he felt completely disheartened. If he couldn't destroy that sun, there was no way to purify it. If he couldn't purify it, there was no way to make it work. The heavenly light world would not be complete. If it wasn't complete, they couldn't move it. If they couldn't move it, everyone here would probably be doomed. If they were doomed, then they were doomed. This thought process spun crazily in his mind and became an endless loop. He felt that his head was about to smoke. After stubbornly pondering for 10 minutes, he inadvertently deduced that the abyssal death mist that had gathered outside could possibly kill them in 3 hours. He shuddered and abruptly turned around, pressing his hands on Yun Nuoxing's shoulders affectionately. If you look at me like that, I will send you outside to feed the abyss death fog. Yun Nuoxing was awakened by this gaze. She couldn't help but have goosebumps all over her body. Hui was a little confused by this interruption. After a long time, he remembered what he wanted to say. Phone, save me. Yun Nuoxing sighed, looked at him faintly and said, If I say I won't save, then I will stay and save myself. Hui grinned. You won't say it. Yun Nuoxing looked at him seriously. Seeing his face full of smiles, she had mixed feelings. She sighed faintly. In the end, who will save you? Hui was stunned. What did you say just now? Yun Nuoxing's veins popped out. It wasn't easy for him to say this sentence naturally. Why didn't this guy hear it? I said. Nothing. Yun Nuoxing angrily slapped his hands away. Thanks to you, I finally woke up. Oh. Hui scratched the back of his head. Then hurry up and do it. I will be in charge of fighting. You go and save that sun. This sentence, in addition to his optimistic attitude, made Yun Nuoxing so angry that she wanted to beat him up. LV Tianguang cupped his hands respectfully towards the two of them. The warriors of the heavenly light world will never back down. If you need our help, just let us know. There's nothing much to say. Yun Nuoxing flung her robe and long black hair. She walked in the galaxy, and came to the front of the line of defense set up by the warriors of the heavenly light world. She looked at the battlefield in the galaxy that was less than 100 miles away from this line of defense. Her deep eyes stared at the dark star and then at the huge gap behind her. She said in a low voice, "Use your strongest power and attack together with us. There's nothing else. This is your world. It's only right that you protect it. Is that okay?" Yun Nuoxing suddenly looked at LV Tianguang seriously. Her eyes flashed with a terrifying glow. LV Tianguang was stunned by this soul-stirring glow. He cupped his hands solemnly and said, "It's only right." "Then go. Step onto this battlefield. For now this is the last battle, end everything." Yun Nuoxing said this with a slightly ferocious expression. At that moment, he had already turned his head so that no one could see him. He shouted loudly and waved his hand to take out the Netherworld Ruin sword. Then, he charged towards the galaxy in front of him along with countless arrays. It was so sudden that no one could react. That fellow was still sleepy and lifeless just a moment ago. How did he suddenly become so lively in the next second, as if he had eaten something strange? We only regained his senses after Yun Nuoxing had charged out. He hurriedly took out the Guardian's shield and huge sword and followed closely behind. "You're an array master. Don't charge so far." LV Tianguang waved his hand ferociously and his shout reverberated in the temporary barrier. "Citizens of the heavenly light world, pick up your weapons and kill our enemies. Take revenge for all our dead people. End this damned war." The person who was maintaining the rule domain threw away the array beneath his feet and charged out with a huge battle axe that was several meters long. That roar caused countless people's blood to boil. The aura of the God tier and the heavenly God tier erupted at the same time, causing a huge wave in the star field, shaking the star sea to the point of boiling. What responded to them was a similarly vast and mighty roar. The death fog in the heaven's light world started to surge, and two similarly vast and mighty voices reverberated in everyone's mind. No one could tell who was the one who was roaring. Yun Nuoxing charged in front of everyone. The thousands of arrays around him flickered with sparkling starlight. His eyes reflected the crazy and distorted strange starry sky. This 1/3 of the region was the place where the distortion was the most serious. All kinds of laws were distorted and changed. The originally peaceful heavenly light world had already become extremely abnormal. Even if the battle was over, it would take a lot of time for this place to recover. Yun Nuoxing's eyes also flickered with a crazy look. No one knew if he thought of something from this scene or recalled something. His aura also burst out with extremely distorted energy. The cloud-like abyss death fog condensed behind him. It was like a ribbon fluttering in the wind. It was like a pair of sinister bone wings. Every bone spur was connected to the center of the array. One person had thousands of huge arrays behind him. The surging energy manifested countless strange phenomena around him. He seemed to have become a star, similarly spitting out energy that caused countless people to tremble in fear. Divine halos appeared behind him one after another. The tens of thousands of formations seemed to have received an order and erupted with all their energy in the next instant. Countless beautiful energy beams shot into the depths of the star region. The energy beams that carried with them sparkling starlight either swept past or directly devoured countless dark creatures. The dark creatures were reduced to ashes in droves, and a large, clean region of space was instantly emptied out. Hui, Lu Tianguang, and the others followed closely behind. They leaped and charged in front of him. The weapons in their hands clanged and cold light flashed, reflecting the starlight in the depths of the heavenly light world. Hui held a shield in his left hand and a huge sword in his right. He led the charge into the abyss death fog. The Guardian's shield could protect his people from harm. The Guardian's sword could split apart all enemies in this world. Those 5 to 6 meters long miniaturized cannon fodder were annihilated in batches by his sword. Lu Tianguang and the other warriors from the heavenly light world fought in a new way. However, there were some similarities. How many worlds had Yun Nuoxing and the others seen? There were too many to count. Even if the saying that every world is different was correct, there were a considerable number of worlds that were similar. Their fighting style looked a little familiar. However, if one thought carefully, they could not remember where they had seen it before. It was just a feeling of familiarity. After the flickering starlight from the thousands of arrays ended, Yun Nuoxing left the area and charged deeper into the abyss death fog alone. His fighting style was not suitable for cooperation with others, and it was impossible for him to cooperate with others. At most, he could identify the energy aura of a few people and then conduct an accurate energy identification. Once there were too many of them, he would not be able to identify them and would easily injure them. If everyone charged in together with him, they might even be killed by him. So he was more suitable for fighting alone. Hui raised his leg and kicked the manifestations away. His left hand, which was holding the shield, swept in a circle, driving the manifestations and the abyss death fog that surrounded him 1,000 feet away. The surroundings were filled with warriors from the heavenly light world who were fighting with their lives on the line. It was very easy to identify them. The abyss death fog and manifestations were all black and filled the entire starry sky. Right Army could identify them at a glance. He glanced at Yun Nuoxing, who was madly activating energy arrays to sweep across the Star River. His face twitched violently. A strategic method like arrays was forcefully used by him to hold back 10,000 men. The arrays were all condensed and compressed. Pure, mixed energy attacks of all kinds. Just this kind of attack alone was enough to make everyone unable to withstand it. We are very close to that node, LV Tianguang suddenly said. Hui swung his arm and threw the shield out. It pierced through hundreds of manifestations like a dart and then caught the shield back. He let out an "ah" and looked at the black star that seemed to have really gotten much closer. He was also stunned. We advanced so quickly? LV Tianguang carefully observed the sun, then abruptly shook his head. It seems like they're moving. The abyssal death mist and its spawns are actually displaying faint sentience. This is truly inconceivable. We've fought against it for many years, but we've never seen such a strange phenomenon. Hui let out a long "oh." After a while, he felt that something was wrong. What did you just say? The sentence before that. They seem to have made that star move. This time, Hui understood what the main point was. Then what will the consequences be? LV Tianguang was silent for quite a while. While he was thinking, Hui had charged out and killed a few rounds. His body was stained with ink-like blood, and the blood of his own people. A red patch was draped over his guardian battle robe. At this moment, LV Tianguang said, "That energy node is a weapon that guards the entrance to the heavenly light world. Hui, but it has never been used before. I have also forgotten how its attacks are like. This is really bad, Hui. Damn it, he should have said this from the start." Chapter 1193. That black sun was like a ball of mud floating in the starry sky. Its original pure light was now covered with a layer of darkness. Its surface was surging violently, constantly twisting. Black flames pierced high into the starry sky like sharp thorns. That star had spontaneously moved a large distance forward. The powerful abyssal death fog's oppressive feeling forced the warriors who were not strong enough to retreat. The defensive line that had just been pushed back seemed to show signs of rebounding. It was like a greedy giant beast. The sharp thorns that reached into the starry sky devoured the dissipating black smoke of the abyssal death fog's manifestation. Its energy was still constantly growing stronger. Sector Master, the energy of the energy node is still increasing. The stability of the heaven's light world is beginning to decline. After a while, the divine artifact may have a weak energy oscillation, which will affect the connection between hundreds of worlds. LV Tianguang turned back to look at the person who spoke. He was the second in command of the Allied forces. If there was such a position, that would be the significance. However, there was no point in mentioning this now. He just suddenly remembered that a lot of information on the battlefield was handed over to this adjutant. This second in command was supposed to handle it. It should have been like this, but before Yun Nuoxing and the others barged in, there was no time to deal with any damn information at all. Only a small number of our warriors, the strongest ones, can break into that energy node. But even if they break in, the second-in-command muttered to himself for a while, and did not finish his sentence. It's not a big problem. Huey's voice came from the side. His figure suddenly descended in front of the two of them. His body flashed with an eternal and brilliant golden light. The black energy and black blood stained on the giant shield and giant sword automatically disappeared with the flickering light. The battle had been going on for more than an hour, and he still looked energetic. The smile on his face showed that he was ready to sacrifice his life for this world at any time. The swarming dark army bared their fangs and brandished their claws. However, before they could reach 100,000 miles in front of them, a crystallized energy beam swept across the starry sky, turning them into dust in the starry sky. Even the Black Star did not have the appetite to devour them. In the past hour or so, Yun Nuoxing had also tried to directly attack the energy node, but the dark army that was entrenched in the surroundings had used the illegal numbers to forcefully resist the attack. As it was not a direct battle, he did not dare to use all his strength. However, he roughly estimated that even if he used all his strength, he really would not be able to do it. The Dark Army formed a seemingly loose energy barrier that could be defended in a short period of time. Moreover, it would not be a problem for them to block his attack, if he did not use the power of the heavenly god of origin. Well, there was no way to use that power now. Restrictions and whatnot were indeed the most annoying. Other than the place where Yun Nuoxing and the others focused their fire, the Dark Army in other places was fighting back and forth with the people from the heavenly light world. The battle line and the battlefield formed a thin and weak cone. The tip of the cone was the Dark Star. It was like an arrowhead that constantly penetrated deep into the heavenly light world. At the moment, it did not show too much of an attack. Everyone could not figure out what it wanted to do, or rather, what the person controlling it wanted to do. However, this situation could not continue for long. They were still in a stalemate, but the warriors from the heavenly light world would feel tired. Even after a temporary rest, they did not recover much of their strength. However, those crazy lifeforms did not feel tired. Furthermore, their numbers were endless. The gap was getting bigger and bigger. The number of lifeforms that were surging in at every moment had reached an astonishing level. If it were not for the Supreme Sua and Yun Nuoxing guarding the battlefield at the gap, the heavenly light world would probably end up in the same situation as before the three of them came here. Boom! Bang! A destructive energy attack that was relatively close exploded not far away from the Dark Star. The massive spherical energy attack cleared out the Dark Army within a few hundred light years. The Dark Star was still intact. That attack had definitely destroyed a portion of the Dark Army. However, there were no signs that the number of dark creatures there had decreased. Yun Nuoxing's figure slowly landed in front of Hui and the others. At the same time, countless arrays that covered the star region appeared. Hui personally watched as Yun Nuoxing increased the number of arrays again and again. Now, he could no longer count how many arrays there were. In any case, He estimated that they could cover an area that was tens of thousands of times larger than the dark star. There isn't much time left. If we continue killing like this, there will be no end. We will be dragged to our deaths here. Yun Nuoshing's right hand clenched his left wrist and shook it. He was calm and composed. His voice gradually surged with a hint of coldness. I am not good at this kind of battle where I have to preserve my strength. If I kill them one by one, I won't be able to clear them out even if I kill them in group. Hui laughed bitterly. He looked at the massive gap in the starry sky in the distance. That was the only passageway that led to the void outside from the heavenly light world. His gaze flickered, and he suddenly said, Feng, do you have a way to seal up that gap? Yun Nuoshing quickly glanced at the depths of the starry sky. In order to reach that place, they had to clear out the dark army that had gathered into a ball of starry sky ink along the way. At the very least, they had to destroy a large portion of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to reach that place. Furthermore, in the depths of the starry sky, there were countless abyssal death fog and its manifestations that surged in like a black waterfall. He also observed that when the black fog surged into the heavenly light world, it transformed into many abyssal death fog manifestations of different sizes and models. The specific process was very straightforward. It was a ball of fog molding into a bunch of monsters. It was really freewheeling. Yun Nuoshing stretched for a while, and the bones in his body were squeezed out with cracking sounds. He twisted his neck and let out a long breath. He closed his eyes for a while, and when he opened them again, his black eyes had already turned into gorgeous colors. The whites of his eyes could no longer be seen. His eyes were only filled with a dazzling flowing radiance. I can seal it up for half an hour, at most 40 minutes. His voice turned into a strange and weak tremor, as if it was a voice that floated in from all directions and poured into everyone's minds. His gaze paused on Hui, and he hesitated for a moment. Can you do it alone? Hui broke into a bright smile and gave him a thumbs up. After all, in my line of work, I have the ability to purify myself. How can I not do it? After a while, he gritted his teeth and smiled bitterly. You have to do it even if you can't. If you don't seal up that gap, there will be no end to it. To seal up that gap. I can't do it, so I can only let Feng do it. If you do it, then I can only brace myself and do it. Yun Nuoshing turned his head, and only a trace of black light flowed through his colorful eyes. Last time, in the name of repairing, you purified a world with collapsed laws. Not even dregs were left. Hui showed an awkward expression. That was an accident, really an accident. Damn, don't look at me like that. That was really an accident. I swear in the name of the realm of the gods, this time there will definitely be no problems. LV Tianguang and the others silently took 2 steps back, and decided to keep some distance from this slightly dangerous guy to avoid being purified by him. Yun Nuoshing glanced at him and sighed faintly. His body turned into a dazzling stream of light and rushed to the side, bypassing the black arrowhead. Hui felt uncomfortable all over because of his sigh. Feng, don't go. What do you mean by sighing? Do you not trust me? Okay, I was wrong. You can at least tell me how to do a normal purification. This is too difficult, I have to do something simple to practice. Yun Nuoshing could not hear the latter part of his words. His speed had exceeded the speed at which Hui's power of the rules spread. In the next second, he came to the side of the cone nail battle line that was guarded by the warriors of the heavenly light realm. He shook his head helplessly. How could he have so much time to prepare and practice? In this life, he had encountered too many things that were beyond his ability to do. Not to mention this life, it was also the same in the future. He always liked to be prepared for everything, but it was always not enough. Many times, many things were beyond his expectations, and he could not control it. No matter how much he prepared, he would not be able to prepare. His entire body was burning with colorful flames, and his aura spread across the galaxy. Countless magic circles behind him slowly merged with the largest magic circle, but they did not merge. The warriors who were guarding the battle line were in a state of high concentration. The sudden arrival of such a person shocked them, and they almost pulled themselves away to meet him. When they came back to their senses, they realized that it was their reinforcements, and they heaved a sigh of relief. "All of you, step back." Yun Nuoshing's voice reverberated across the galaxy, and it was very strange. "Guard the battle line. Don't let a single manifestation pass." The warriors from the heavenly light world cupped their hands respectfully and methodically controlled the battle line to slowly shrink and solidify, condensing into a massive energy barrier that stretched out for countless miles. The warriors who were still fighting outside the barrier also received the message, and retreated as they fought. When they entered the defensive barrier, they turned around to maintain the barrier and assist their own people in retreating from the battlefield. Many people hurriedly heaved a sigh of relief. If they were allowed to continue fighting on the battlefield, their mentality might be the first to collapse. They had been fighting endlessly for a very long time, and there was no time for them to take a breather. If they were to continue fighting like this, even heavenly gods would be exhausted to death. Yun Nuoshing passed through the barrier alone. Before the manifestations of the abyssal death fog that were chasing after the warriors from the heavenly light world could reach the side of the barrier, the endless black monsters turned into half-smoke and half-solid existences. The most fatal parts of their bodies exuded astonishing energy, and their energy levels ranged from beginner to post-god level. They squeezed into a ball of chaotic smoke and headed straight for Yun Nuoshing. A spot that was the size of a person could receive dozens of attacks at the same time, possibly from several monsters or dozens of monsters at the same time. At this moment, almost half of the galaxy was filled with endless enmity towards him. If the intent that rushed towards him were to land on an ordinary heavenly god, it might cause his mind to collapse from the pressure and cause him to lose his consciousness. The faces of the warriors from the heavenly light world were pale. Previously, they had been fighting as a group and had not tried to let the powers of the abyssal death fog completely combine into one. At this moment, this discovery caused fear to rise in their hearts. At the same time, they looked worriedly at Yun Nuoshing, who had walked out of the barrier, and wanted to ask him to return immediately. The elements of nirvana and the gorgeous energy gathered in the palm of Yun Nuoshing's right hand. If one opened their eyes wide, they could still see those gorgeous energy particles chasing each other, slowly condensing into a ball, and the elements of nirvana had been obediently stabilized in the center from the beginning, fixed by those gorgeous energy connections. He slowly raised his drooping right hand, and the beautiful energy gathered into a ball of light in his palm. The energy lines gathered from the surrounding star region, and as if they were pressed down by a heavy object, they collapsed under the elements of destruction. The light on Yun Nuoshing's body also rapidly flowed into his right hand, and the black cloud-like bone wings behind him fluttered once again. Unstoppable destructive energy was born in his right palm. Yun Nuoshing withdrew all of his control, allowing the energy to flow into the ball of energy in his palm without any restraint. That ball of energy was so brilliant that it was as if a colorful sun had been born in the star region. It was magnificent, but it made people feel suffocated. "Take this star region with you, and turn it into dust," Yun Nuoshing muttered in a low voice, and his strange laughter caused the starry sky to tremble slightly. He slowly pressed the ball of light in his hand against the starry sky in front of him, as if he was pressing it against a wall. In front of the ball of light, the space condensed into a substance, as if it had turned into a mirror. It was easily shattered by the colorful energy ball, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared in the space. Fragments fell from the starry sky, and the fragments that reflected the starry sky silently disappeared. It was as if this space had suddenly disappeared. The moment the starry sky was shattered, a colorful sun suddenly appeared in this star region, and then it suddenly expanded. The brilliant energy that erupted in this starry sky attracted the attention of everyone in the heavenly light sector. The light pierced through all the rules and restrictions and instantly appeared in their line of sight. It was impossible not to notice it. Everyone who noticed this scene widened their eyes in shock. Space had disappeared, and they could no longer sense space. Rules and order had also disappeared at the same time. Their senses had been devoured and drawn to the void. At that moment, everyone who sensed it had the illusion that they were standing in an endless void, and there was only eternal loneliness beside them. That gaze was almost eternal. Hui was stunned for a moment, and the shield in his hand almost slipped out of his hand. Then, he casually used the shield to smash a series of manifestations. He was dumbfounded. What? His voice disappeared, and all the sounds in the heavenly light sector disappeared. In the first few seconds, the entire starry sky lit up with an extremely dazzling colorful sun. Space, rules, and order disintegrated and disappeared, and so did sound. The colorful light that was constantly expanding at the end of everyone's line of sight suddenly spread out. It was bright, extremely bright, and brilliant, but it was filled with an extremely violent and merciless power. Those who sensed it could feel that everything that could be called things in the heavenly light sector, such as space, time, light, energy, and the void, were all attracted by that power and fell into the depths of the colorful sun. The starry sky distorted and collapsed, and they could even see the starlight in the distance distorting and surging in that direction. The chaos zero point was attracting everything over, clearing everything and returning everything to its original state, the state of nothingness amidst the chaos. Even the abyss death fog could not resist this power. Yun Nuoshing did not use the power of a heavenly god of origin. He only used the almost endless capacity. Once the chaos origin was activated, it would devour everything it came into contact with, including the power of the user himself. He was not worried that the almost endless amount of power would be sucked dry, because the power of a peak heavenly god of origin was enough for him to use the chaos origin to completely devour half of the 8 elements sector and return everything to chaos. The remaining half would also become abnormal due to its enormous power. The order would collapse, and even if it stopped, it would become a complete mess. The infinitely expanding chaotic origin had already cleared out the star region in front of him. He could sense the aura of the land of nothingness. A terrifying starry wind blew in the heaven's light world, drawing everything in this world towards that chaotic origin. The stars shifted their positions, and the starlight was annihilated. The endless army of darkness disappeared completely the moment they came into contact with the colorful light circle. Even that dark star was forcefully dragged a distance away from the origin. Hui hurriedly put up the guardian barrier, isolating the star domain. Only then did the tilting of the heavenly light sector forcefully stop. However, he could still sense that the infinite energy and matter were crazily falling towards that space. He wanted to find Yun Nuoshing behind the brilliant light and ask him when he was going to stop. However, it would probably be useless even if he asked. If he did, there would be an explosion. Yes, that ball of infinitely condensed and compressed energy was definitely not for decoration. The distortion of the laws was too severe. He could not use his law domain. He looked at the dark star. The chaos origin had cut off the dark waterfall that was crazily pouring into the heavenly light sector, taking away most of the army of darkness. The appearance of the star gradually became clearer. Now, the abyssal death mist manifestation was still unable to stabilize its body in a place without space and laws, so it was being sucked into the chaos origin. I don't care. I'll just bite the bullet and attack. Hui knew that this was an opportunity. When Yun Nuoshing blasted a huge hole in the void, it was the best time to attack. He hurriedly shouted at LV Tianguang, but realized that no matter what he did, he could not make a sound. He could only slap LV Tianguang and point at the dark star. Then, He raised the guardian barrier and the giant sword and rushed towards the dark star. LV Tianguang hurriedly pressed down on his long hair that was being blown by the starry wind. In fact, that was because the space was still collapsing and shrinking towards that direction. It was as if everything was being sucked over. He opened his eyes and looked in the direction Hui was rushing towards and instantly understood. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the second-in-command of the Alliance army. The second-in-command was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly grabbed the person beside him. Then, the unlucky person who could not even open his eyes was shocked. He subconsciously grabbed something beside him and pulled another person into his hands. Then, the group of people was dragged into a long strip that fluttered in the wind like a banner. Hui used all the energy he could to prop up the divine domain, hoping to stabilize this chaotic and crazy space. However, just as his domain opened up, he realized that what should have been a spherical domain had been sucked into the shape of a water droplet. He was at the bottom of the water droplet, the sharp tip facing the direction of the primal chaos origin. This made him speechless. He raised his shield and pushed forward the manifestation that had been blown to his side by the gale. The next second, he saw that unlucky manifestation fly with the wind, disappearing at a speed of several light years per second. He felt that he was about to fly out. Now, he was not flying forward on his own. Instead, he was being pulled down by the entire space. His domain had stabilized the space of the heavenly light world. Replacing this space to suffer this kind of pain was a new space from the outside. To put it bluntly, he had found a scapegoat, and now that he had left the safe zone, he was falling into the abyss with that scapegoat. The energy of that dark star was not weak either. It had forcibly withstood this level of suction and tearing. If Yun Nuoshing did not increase the energy output, it should not have been pulled over so quickly. However, there was no need to increase the power. If it increased the power, he would have flown over. The dark army that had acted as a physical barrier had already disappeared, leaving only that lonely star hanging in the star field. We rushed to its surroundings against the wind, and was captured by its gravity, falling to the surface of the star. The sudden calmness of the surroundings shocked and horrified him at the same time. To be able to resist the energy released by Yun Nuoshing at this moment. How much energy had been accumulated here? Hua, it seems like we can talk here. What exactly has this energy node been modified into? LV Tianguang's voice came from behind him. Hui hurriedly turned his head and saw that the group of people who were fluttering in the wind had been safely captured by the gravity of this dark star. They had safely landed beside him and were sizing up the massive object in front of them. I was just about to ask you guys. Huey's cheeks twitched. The massive energy carrier in front of him had become a terrifying object that carried countless nightmares and countless dark energy. The energy that it had accumulated was probably not any less than what Yun Nuoshing had injected into the chaos origin. How long has this energy node been occupied? He couldn't help but ask. LV Tianguang counted with his fingers. About 2 months. Since 2 months ago, when our plan started to be implemented, the battle has been going on until now. It's killing me. If it doesn't end now, I plan to drag the heavenly light world down with me and perish together with them. Hui silently turned his head. This meant that this energy node had been occupied for 2 months. The abyss death fog had accumulated energy here for 2 months. Haha. It was a miracle that the heavenly light world was not destroyed. LV Tianguang used all his strength to touch this dark star. Even though it had turned into a century egg, and was no longer the egg that he originally knew and was emitting a rotten stench that had been left aside for tens of millions of years, it was still the egg that he had pinched with his own hands. He didn't know what he was thinking anymore. In short, he was trying his best to sense the dark star below. After a while, he came to a conclusion. It has not been completely transformed. It can still be saved. Nonsense, if it has been completely transformed, do you still need your heavenly light world? Hui spat in his face. LV Tianguang smiled bitterly and continued. The core of the energy node is still there. As long as we remove the corrupted part, there will be no problem. So? Hurry up and give me a solution. Otherwise, I will purify it. Hui hurriedly rolled up his sleeves. Don't. LV Tianguang turned pale with fright. After being purified by him, the heavenly light world might be finished. We can slowly drain its energy and then direct it in that direction. Hui followed his finger and looked at the chaos origin. He said seriously, Are you sure that this won't kill anyone? I don't know. LV Tianguang shook his head honestly. But this is the only way. For the time being all right. Then let's do it this way. Hui flung his clothes, and the guardian's shield and giant sword that were hanging on his hands disappeared. A slender god's staff appeared in front of him and was grabbed by him. He forcefully tapped the god's staff on the space in front of him. A huge golden rune appeared out of thin air. It might be about the size of the sun below. Purify it for me. Hui pressed the god's staff down with a holy expression. The sacred rune suddenly smashed towards the dark star. Wah! LV Tianguang and the rest only had time to let out a tragic cry before their vision was blocked by the clash between the golden and black light. LV Tianguang only felt that he had one foot in the cycle of reincarnation. He decided that he would never talk to people from the God world in this lifetime. The one who got rid of Void was a lunatic. The one in front of him was a lunatic. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.